The moment Emily Carter ran into that burning building, she had no idea she was about to save the one child who would change her entire life. Most people froze when they heard the screams. Most people waited for firefighters. Most people protected themselves first. Emily wasn't most people. What happened in those 60 seconds of fire and smoke didn't just rescue a terrified boy from certain death. It set off a chain of events that would pull a broken schoolteacher off the streets, challenge a grieving billionaire's carefully controlled world, and prove that sometimes the people society throws away are exactly the ones worth saving. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. Yeah. Part 1. The February wind cut through Emily Carter's jacket like it wasn't even there. Because honestly, the thin canvas material might as well have been tissue paper. She'd bought it 3 years ago at a department store clearance sale, back when she still had an apartment, a job, a life that made sense. Back when homeless was something that happened to other people in other cities, something she'd read about in articles that made her feel sympathetic for about 5 minutes before she went back to grading papers. Funny how fast sympathy disappears when you're the one sleeping under newspapers. She pressed her back against the cold brick wall of the abandoned warehouse on Morrison Street, tucking her hands under her armpits for warmth. Her fingers had gone numb about an hour ago. The sun was dropping fast behind the skyline, painting everything in that particular shade of orange that would have been beautiful if she wasn't so damn cold and hungry. 6:30. She knew without checking a watch, hadn't owned one for months. When you live outside, you learn to read time by shadows and stomach pangs, and the rhythm of people heading home from jobs they probably hated but would never appreciate enough. A couple walked past on the opposite sidewalk, the woman's laugh bright and careless. They didn't look her way. People never did. Emily had learned that particular magic trick fast, how to become invisible just by sitting still with dirty clothes and tangled hair. Society's greatest disappearing act required no illusion, just poverty. She pulled her knees to her chest and tried to remember what she'd eaten that day. Half a sandwich from behind the deli on 4th Street, discovered before the garbage truck came. Some crackers a church volunteer had handed out around noon. Water from a public fountain that tasted like rust and old pipes. Not exactly the meal plan she'd imagined back when she was 25 and standing in front of her first classroom, full of ideas about changing lives and making differences, and all that naive teacher bullshit they fill your head with in college. Emily Carter is going to save the world, her mother used to say, pride lighting up her face. Yeah, look how that turned out. The memory of her mother's face triggered the familiar ache in her chest, grief mixed with guilt, mixed with rage at a medical system that could bankrupt a family for the crime of getting sick. 14 months of hospital bills, 14 months of watching cancer eat away at the only person who'd ever really believed in Emily's potential. 14 months that cost everything. Her savings, her apartment deposit, 2 months of missed rent while she camped at the hospital, and finally, her teaching job when she couldn't pull herself together fast enough after the funeral. "We need someone more reliable," Principal Henderson had said, his voice professionally sympathetic in that way that meant he'd already made up his mind. "Perhaps you should take more time to grieve." Time to grieve. As if grief was something you could schedule between breakfast and lunch, wrap up neatly, then return to normal like nothing had shattered. Emily pressed her palms against her eyes, willing away the tears that seemed to live just behind her eyelids these days. Crying didn't help. Crying didn't bring her mother back, didn't restore her bank account, didn't convince landlords to rent to someone whose credit score had imploded. A siren wailed in the distance, the city's constant soundtrack. She was just starting to think about where she'd sleep tonight, the shelter on Grove Street if they had room, the overpass on 7th if they didn't, when she heard it. A scream. Not the normal city sounds of traffic and conversation and the occasional argument. This was different, high-pitched, terrified, the kind of sound that hits your nervous system before your brain can process it. A child's scream. Emily's head snapped up. Across the street, maybe 50 yards down, smoke was billowing from a 3-story residential building. Dark, thick smoke that rolled out the windows like something alive and hungry. Already people were stumbling out of the entrance, coughing, shouting, pulling each other toward the street. She was on her feet before she'd made a conscious decision to stand. More screams now. Adult voices yelling, someone shouting about calling 911. The crowd grew quickly, neighbors spilling out of surrounding buildings, people stopping their cars, everyone with their phones out because apparently you couldn't have a crisis anymore without documentation. Then she saw him. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, standing in the doorway on the second floor. There was an external entrance, she realized, some kind of addition to the building with its own door. He was screaming, one hand gripping the doorframe while smoke poured out behind him, so thick she couldn't see anything beyond his small silhouette. "Someone help him!" A woman's voice, shrill with panic. "Where are the firefighters?" A man, angry, helpless. "Oh my God, oh my God!" Someone else just repeating it like a prayer. But nobody moved. 30, maybe 40 people standing there in the street, watching this child trapped in a doorway while smoke swallowed the building behind him, and nobody moved. Emily understood it in that distant part of her brain that still thought about things logically. Moving toward that building meant smoke inhalation, burns, potential death. Moving toward that building was the opposite of what every survival instinct screamed. These were normal people, good people probably, people with families and jobs and futures. They didn't want to gamble on a stranger's child. She also understood, in a deeper place that had nothing to do with logic, that none of that mattered. That little boy was someone's whole world, someone's reason for getting up in the morning, someone's laughter and scraped knees and first day of school photos, someone's everything, just like she had been her mother's everything. Emily was running before the thought finished forming. "Hey, wait!" Someone tried to grab her arm, but she shook them off. Her bare feet, she'd lost her shoes 2 days ago, stepping out of them while running from someone who'd tried to rob her, slapped against the cold pavement. She barely felt it, didn't feel the broken bottle glass that sliced her heel, didn't feel anything except the tunnel vision of that doorway and that child. The heat hit her first. Even from 10 feet away, she could feel it radiating off the building in waves. The kind of heat that meant the fire inside was massive, eating through everything it touched. The smoke was worse. It slammed into her lungs, thick and toxic and wrong. Her eyes immediately started streaming. Her throat closed up. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, get air, save herself. She kept running. "I've got you," she shouted, though she wasn't sure the boy could hear her over the roar of the flames. She wasn't sure she could hear herself. "I've got you!" The stairs up to the second-floor entrance were metal, already hot enough that she felt the skin on her feet blister with each step. 2 stairs, 3, 4. The boy was reaching for her now, crying, his face streaked with soot and tears. She grabbed him, wrapped her arms around his small body, and pulled him against her chest, tucking his face into her shoulder so he wouldn't breathe the smoke. He was heavier than he looked, solid, real, alive. That's when she heard the crack. Emily looked up just in time to see a section of the burning doorframe above them splinter and fall. No time to run. No time to do anything except curl her body around the child, making herself the shield, feeling the impact as burning wood crashed against her back and shoulder. The pain was immediate and absolute, like someone had pressed a branding iron between her shoulder blades. She heard herself scream, or maybe that was just in her head. Everything was sound and heat and agony. But she didn't let go of the boy. Her legs moved automatically, stumbling back down the metal stairs even as her vision started to blur from pain and smoke inhalation. She could hear shouting getting closer. Strong hands grabbed her arms, pulling her forward, away from the building. Someone was taking the child from her arms. "No," she tried to say, but her voice was gone, destroyed by smoke. "It's okay. He's safe. You did it." A man's voice, urgent and amazed. Emily's legs gave out. The pavement rushed up to meet her, hard and cold against her burned skin. She could hear the child crying somewhere close by, which meant he was alive, which meant it was okay if she just closed her eyes for a second, just a second to catch her breath. "Ma'am? Ma'am, stay with us." But the darkness was already pulling her down, and she was too tired to fight it. When Emily woke up, the first thing she noticed was that she wasn't in a hospital. The second thing she noticed was that she probably should be. She was lying on cracked pavement in an alley 1 block over from the burning building. She could still hear the sirens, still smell the smoke that clung to her clothes and hair and skin. Her entire back felt like it was on fire, a deep burning pain that radiated from between her shoulder blades down to her lower spine. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The pain flared white hot, forcing a gasp from her raw throat. "Easy. A woman's voice. You took some debris to the back. Looks pretty bad. Emily blinked until her vision focused. A middle-aged woman in a stained coat was crouching beside her. Maggie, she realized, one of the other homeless regulars who usually slept near the overpass. Her weathered face was creased with concern. The boy? Emily's voice came out as barely a whisper, shredded by smoke. Safe. Saw them load him in an ambulance. You saved his life. Maggie's eyes were wet. That was the bravest damn thing I've ever seen, girl. Emily closed her eyes. Safe. The boy was safe. Everything else was secondary to that. Paramedics were looking for you, Maggie continued. But you know how it is. Soon as you saw those ambulances, you ran. Can't blame you. Hospital means bills you can't pay, social workers asking questions, maybe cops if they decide you were trespassing or some bullshit. She'd run. Emily didn't remember running, but that made sense. Instinct. The same instinct that made every homeless person in the city disappear when authority figures showed up. When you lived outside the system, you learned to avoid the system's helpers as much as its enforcers. Someone wrapped your shoulder, Maggie said, gesturing to the torn fabric bound around Emily's upper back. Did what they could before you bolted. Emily reached back carefully, feeling the makeshift bandage. It was already soaked through with blood and fluid from the burn. The pain underneath was constant, throbbing, the kind of deep injury that whispered about infection and complications and all the medical problems she couldn't afford to treat. You need a hospital, Maggie said firmly. That burn's serious. I need to not exist in the system, Emily replied, her voice flat. You know what happens. They patch you up, then there's bills, then collections, then it's another black mark making sure I never crawl out of this hole. You could die from infection. I could die from a lot of things. Emily forced herself to sit up, biting back a scream as the movement pulled at her burned skin. Dying isn't exactly a new risk. Maggie helped her stand, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Two women the world had forgotten, surviving in the cracks of a city that preferred to pretend they didn't exist. That boy's parents, Maggie said slowly. They're probably looking for you, probably want to say thank you. Rich family, judging by the building. I don't need thanks. Maybe you need what comes with it. Emily shook her head, immediately regretting it as dizziness washed over her. I did what anyone would do. Bullshit. 40 people stood there watching. You were the only one who moved. Maggie's hand tightened on Emily's arm. Maybe that counts for something. Maybe that's worth more than you think. But Emily was already limping toward the mouth of the alley, every step sending fresh waves of pain through her body. She'd saved a child's life. That was enough. That had to be enough. Because the alternative, letting herself hope for recognition, gratitude, anything that might change her situation, was more dangerous than any fire. Hope hurt worse than burns. Alexander Bennett's hands were shaking. He stared at them, these hands that commanded boardrooms and signed million-dollar deals without hesitation, and watched them tremble like he was some terrified kid instead of a 32-year-old CEO who'd built an empire from nothing. His son was alive. Lucas was alive. The hospital room was too bright, too white, too clean. Lucas sat on the examination table, small and scared in a hospital gown, while a doctor checked his vitals for the third time. Mild smoke inhalation. Some superficial burns on his hands where he'd grabbed the hot door frame. Otherwise unharmed. Unharmed because a stranger had run into a burning building when no one else would. Mr. Bennett, I really think Lucas should stay overnight for observation, the doctor started, but Alexander cut him off with a sharp gesture. No, I want him home. I want my own doctors there. I want... He stopped, realizing he was being irrational. Control. He needed to maintain control. That's what he did. That's what he'd always done. I apologize. Yes, overnight observation is fine. Thank you, doctor. The doctor nodded and stepped out, leaving Alexander alone with his son. Lucas hadn't said much since the paramedics had brought him in, just sat there, small and quiet, occasionally coughing from the smoke. His dark hair was still streaked with soot. There was a smudge of ash on his cheek that the nurses had somehow missed. Alexander crossed to him, kneeling so they were eye level. He wanted to grab Lucas, hold him, never let go, but he forced himself to be gentle, controlled. How are you feeling, buddy? Okay. Lucas's voice was small, then quieter. I was scared. Something cracked in Alexander's chest. I know you were. But you're safe now. Because of the lady. Alexander froze. What lady? The lady who saved me. Lucas looked up, his eyes, the same dark eyes as his mother's. The mother who died 3 years ago and left Alexander to raise their son alone, serious and solemn. She ran through the fire. Everyone else was just standing there, but she ran. Her feet were bleeding, Dad. Bleeding feet. Which meant she'd been barefoot. Which meant... What did she look like? Alexander asked carefully. Sad. Lucas said it with the blunt honesty of a 6-year-old. Her clothes were dirty, and she looked really sad. But when she grabbed me, she wasn't scared at all. She said, I've got you. And then the fire fell on her, but she didn't let me go. She didn't let me go even when she got hurt. Alexander's throat tightened. A homeless woman. It had to be. Barefoot, dirty clothes, running into danger while everyone else with shoes and clean clothes and comfortable lives, stood frozen. Where is she? He asked. Did the paramedics bring her in? Lucas shook his head. She fell down outside. People were trying to help her, but then she got up and ran away, really fast, like she was scared of the ambulances. Of course she ran. If she was homeless, she would have run from paramedics, from hospitals, from anyone official. Would have run from help itself because help came with questions and systems and requirements she couldn't meet. She had saved his son's life and then disappeared into the city like smoke. The door opened and Marcus, his head of security, stepped in, a broad-shouldered former Marine who'd been with Alexander for 6 years. Sir, I've compiled initial reports from the scene. The fire started in the basement unit, electrical malfunction most likely. Buildings being evacuated and investigated. But about the woman, tell me you found her. Marcus's expression went carefully neutral, which was never a good sign. We have approximately 40 witnesses who saw her enter the building and carry Lucas out. Descriptions are consistent: Caucasian female, late 20s to early 30s, brown hair, thin build, barefoot, wearing a canvas jacket and jeans. Multiple witnesses confirm she sustained burns to her back and shoulder from falling debris. And she disappeared within 90 seconds of the rescue. 2 witnesses say they saw her run into an alley 1 block east. After that, nothing. No hospital admissions matching her description. No one using emergency services for burn treatment. It's like she vanished. Alexander stood, his jaw tight. She didn't vanish. She's hurt and scared and hiding somewhere in this city. I want her found. Sir, with all due respect, searching for one homeless woman in a city of 8 million, I don't care if it takes the entire security team. I don't care if it takes hiring private investigators. I don't care what it costs. Alexander's voice was steel. She saved my son's life when no one else would. Find her. Marcus nodded slowly. Understood. I'll expand the search parameters. Homeless shelters, soup kitchens, known camps under the overpasses. We'll find her. Fast, Marcus. She has untreated burns. God knows what kind of infection risk. Alexander turned back to Lucas, who was watching him with those 2 old eyes. We find her, and we make this right. Because that's what Alexander Bennett did. He fixed problems. He controlled situations. He made things right through sheer force of will and unlimited resources. He'd just never had to fix something that actually mattered before. Tight. 3 days later, Emily learned that running from gratitude was harder than running from anything else. She'd moved her sleeping spot 4 times in 72 hours. Every time she settled somewhere, word would filter through the homeless network, men in suits asking questions, showing her picture. Apparently someone had caught a photo of her at the fire scene, though she looked like death warmed over in it. Security types offering money for information. Rich people looking for the hero woman. Hero. The word made her want to laugh, except laughing hurt her burned shoulder. She'd found antibiotics. Stolen them, technically, from a pharmacy in the scramble after a shoplifter had drawn security's attention. It wasn't something she was proud of, but infection was already setting in and dying from blood poisoning seemed stupid after surviving the fire. The pills helped. Probably kept her alive. Definitely didn't make her feel less like a criminal. She was huddled in a loading dock behind a closed restaurant, trying to ignore the smell of garbage while she changed the bandage on her shoulder, fresh fabric torn from a t-shirt she'd found in a donation bin, when she heard footsteps. Emily tensed. Late afternoon sun slanted through the alley entrance. One person, judging by the footsteps. Male, medium build if the sound was right. "I'm not looking for trouble," she called out, her voice still rough from smoke damage. "Just resting. I'll move." "I'm not here to move you." The voice was deep, educated, with an edge of exhaustion that Emily recognized from her own throat. "I'm looking for Emily Carter." Her blood went cold. Nobody should know that name. She hadn't been Emily Carter in months, just another nameless woman in the city's invisible population. A man stepped into view, and Emily understood immediately why the homeless network had been buzzing. Expensive suit, probably cost more than she used to make in a month. Watch that caught the light. Shoes so polished they looked dangerous. Dark hair slightly messy like he'd been running his hands through it. Mid-30s, attractive in that carved-from-marble way that came from personal trainers and nutritionists. Rich. Powerful. Everything she wasn't. He stopped several feet away, and his eyes, dark, intense, haunted, locked on hers. "You're her," he said. It wasn't a question. "You're the woman who saved my son." Emily forced herself to stand, ignoring the pull of burned skin and the dizziness from not eating much in 3 days. She lifted her chin. "I don't want anything from you." "I know, that's what everyone keeps telling me." He took a step closer, then stopped when she shifted back. "My name is Alexander Bennett, the boy you saved. Lucas. He's my son. My only family." Bennett. The name clicked in her memory. Tech billionaire, young genius type, one of those people Forbes wrote breathless articles about. Emily had taught several students whose parents worked for Bennett Industries. Good company, supposedly. Decent benefits. Not that it mattered now. "He's okay?" she asked despite herself. "Because of you." Alexander's voice cracked slightly. The doctor said if he'd been in there another minute, the smoke inhalation would have been critical. You got him out just in time. Anyone would have... "Stop!" The word came out sharp. He took a breath, visibly controlling himself. "I've spent 3 days reviewing security footage from the scene. Do you know how many people stood there watching my son scream? 43. 43 people. And the only one who moved was a woman with no shoes, no resources, no safety net. So please don't tell me anyone would have done it, because I have video proof that you were the only one who did." Emily wrapped her arms around herself, feeling exposed. Seen. It was worse than being invisible. "What do you want?" "To thank you? To help you? To..." He gestured helplessly, and for a second the polished billionaire facade cracked enough to show something human underneath. "To do something. You saved everything that matters to me. There has to be something I can do." "You can leave me alone. Your shoulder needs medical attention. Real attention, not street antibiotics that might be expired." She stiffened. "How do you..." "I have investigators. Good ones. They've been tracking your movements, talking to people who know you. I know about your mother, about the medical bills, about losing your teaching job." His expression softened. "I know life destroyed you, and you're surviving the only way you know how. And I know that Byrne is infected, and you're too stubborn or too scared to get help." Anger flared hot in Emily's chest. "You have no right to investigate me." "You're right, I don't. I'm sorry." And he actually sounded it. "But I'm also not going to apologize for finding the woman who saved my son's life. I need to do this, Emily. Please let me help you. I don't need charity. I'm not offering charity." Alexander reached into his jacket. Emily tensed, but he just pulled out a business card. "I'm offering a job." The words hung in the air like something impossible. "What?" Emily's voice came out flat with disbelief. "Lucas won't stop talking about you. He calls you the brave lady and asks me every day if you're okay. He wants to see you again." Alexander held out the card. "I need someone I can trust to help with him. Someone who understands kindness isn't about money. Someone who would run into fire for a child they don't even know." "You want to hire a homeless woman to care for your son?" Emily laughed, and it came out bitter. "Do you hear how insane that sounds? I've hired 5 nannies in the last 2 years. All had perfect credentials. All lasted less than 4 months because they treated Lucas like a job requirement, not a human being." Alexander's jaw tightened. "You risked your life for him. That tells me more about your character than any resume ever could." Emily stared at the card in his hand, not taking it. This had to be a trick. People like Alexander Bennett didn't offer jobs to people like her. They wrote checks to feel better about themselves, then went back to their comfortable lives. They didn't invite disaster into their homes. "I can't," she said. "I can't be what you need. Look at me. I'm broken. I'm dirty. I probably smell like garbage and failure. Your son doesn't need that in his life. My son needs someone who cares whether he lives or dies, someone who wouldn't hesitate to protect him." Alexander's voice dropped. His mother, my wife, died 3 years ago, cancer. I know about medical bills that destroy everything. I know about loss. And I know that Lucas needs more than I can give him right now. He needs someone who understands that love matters more than money. The mention of his wife hit Emily in the chest. She saw it in his eyes now, the same grief she carried, the same exhausted sadness that came from watching someone you love disappear by degrees. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "about your wife. And I'm sorry about your mother." He took a careful step closer. "But this isn't about our grief. This is about my son, who won't sleep because he keeps asking if the brave lady is okay, who drew a picture of you yesterday and hung it on his wall, who needs to know that the person who saved him is safe." Emily felt something dangerous rising in her chest. Hope. Stupid and reckless and absolutely terrifying. "I don't have anything," she whispered. "No home, no references, no clean clothes. I can't even pass a background check because I don't exist in the system anymore. I don't care about any of that." Alexander finally closed the distance between them, and Emily was too tired to run. He pressed the business card into her hand. "Come to this address tomorrow at noon. Let me at least get you medical care, a proper meal, a chance to meet Lucas again. After that, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. But give me one day to show you that maybe you don't have to do this alone anymore." The card was heavy in her hand. Heavier than it should be. "Why?" Emily asked, the word breaking. "Why do you care so much?" Alexander's eyes met hers, and in them she saw the truth he wasn't saying out loud. Because guilt was eating him alive. Because while he'd been in some boardroom making money, his son had nearly died. Because a stranger had been braver than him, more selfless than him, had saved what mattered most while he hadn't even been there. "Because you deserve better than this," he said instead. "And because my son deserves to know that heroism gets rewarded, not forgotten." Emily looked down at the card. Expensive paper stock, embossed lettering, an address in the part of the city where buildings had doormen and apartments cost more than she used to make in a year. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, a trick, something too good to be true because nothing in her life had been good in so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like. But she thought about a little boy with soot on his face, asking if she was okay. She thought about her mother saying, "Emily Carter is going to save the world." She thought about the fact that she'd already survived the impossible once this week. "One day," she heard herself say. "I'll come for one day, but I'm not promising anything." Relief transformed Alexander's face. "One day is all I'm asking." He turned to leave, then paused. From his pocket he pulled out several bills, 50s, she realized with shock, and set them carefully on the loading dock's edge. "For food. Clean clothes if you want them. Please take care of that shoulder before tomorrow." Then he was gone, footsteps fading back down the alley, leaving Emily alone with a business card and more money than she'd held in months, and a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. She looked at the bills, looked at the card, looked at her bandaged shoulder and bare feet, and the garbage bags that had become her neighbors. "Just one day," she whispered to the empty alley. But in her chest, that dangerous thing, hope, was already starting to bloom. You said Part 2. Lưu ý, viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Part 2 lưu ý, viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới, liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, nhân vật không hoàn hảo, hội thoại tự nhiên, tránh ngôn ngữ văn chương sáo rơi và cụm từ AI điển hình. Viết như nhà văn chuyên nghiệp, không như AI cố gắng nghe sang, có yếu tố con người, Cấm miêu tả qua mượt mà và hoàn hảo, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau, câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa, lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document, chỉ đắn bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyện. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí, không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật, không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu.
Show more 921. Claude responded. Part 2. Part 2. Emily stood outside the address on the business card for 20 minutes before she found the courage to approach the entrance. The building wasn't just nice. It was the kind of nice that had its own ecosystem. Doorman in a uniform that probably cost more than her old monthly rent. Marble lobby visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. A fountain, for crying out loud, like this was some European palace instead of a residential building in the middle of the city. She'd used most of Alexander's money on antibiotics from a real pharmacy, the kind where you talk to an actual pharmacist who looked concerned about her shoulder. The rest went to a thrift store. Clean jeans that almost fit, a sweater without holes, underwear that wasn't falling apart, and shoes. Real shoes with actual soles. The luxury of it had almost made her cry in the store's fitting room. She'd showered at a community center, scrubbing away days of street grime until her skin turned red. Washed her hair 3 times. The woman in the mirror afterward looked almost human, if you ignored the hollows under her eyes and the way her collarbones jutted out too sharp. Still looked like someone who didn't belong here. The doorman noticed her hovering on the sidewalk. His expression flickered, probably trying to decide if she was lost or dangerous before settling into professional neutrality. Emily forced herself to walk forward before she could change her mind. "Can I help you?" His tone was polite but cautious. "I'm here to see Alexander Bennett, penthouse." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "He's expecting me." The doorman's eyebrows rose slightly. He picked up a phone, spoke quietly, then looked surprised at whatever response he got. "Of course. Mr. Bennett said to send you right up. Top floor, elevators to your left." The lobby was even more intimidating on the inside. Her shoes, cheap but clean, squeaked slightly on the polished marble. A couple walking through with designer shopping bags glanced at her, their expressions carefully blank in that way rich people had perfected. Not quite rude, just making it clear she didn't fit. Emily jabbed the elevator button harder than necessary. The ride up felt endless. 43 floors, the panel said. 43 floors between the street and whatever waited at the top. She watched the numbers climb and tried not to think about how easy it would be to just press the button for the ground floor, walk out, disappear back into the comfortable anonymity of being no one. But she'd made a promise. One day. She could survive one day. The elevator opened directly into a foyer that was bigger than her old apartment. Hardwood floors, abstract art on the walls that probably cost 6 figures, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum. Alexander was waiting, and for a second Emily almost didn't recognize him. No suit this time, just dark jeans and a sweater that somehow looked expensive anyway. His hair was messier than before, like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired, nervous even. "You came," he said, and the relief in his voice was unmistakable. "I said I would." Emily stayed close to the elevator, one hand near the button panel. Escape route. Always know your escape route. "I wasn't sure you would. After I left, I thought maybe I'd pushed too hard, scared you off." He took a step forward, then seemed to think better of it. "How's your shoulder?" "Better. Got real antibiotics. Thanks for the money." That wasn't charity. That was basic human decency. He gestured toward the apartment. "Please come in. Lucas is in the living room. He's been watching for you since breakfast." The mention of the boy made Emily's chest tighten. She stepped out of the elevator and the doors closed behind her with a soft chime that sounded like commitment. The apartment was enormous. Open floor plan with windows overlooking the entire city. Kitchen that looked like it had never been cooked in. Furniture that was probably Italian or Danish or whatever rich people bought. Everything was clean, modern, expensive, and somehow completely lifeless. Then she heard a small voice call out, "Dad? Is she here?" And suddenly, none of the expensive emptiness mattered. Lucas appeared around a corner and Emily's breath caught. He was wearing superhero pajamas. Spider-Man, she thought.
and his dark hair stuck up in about 5 different directions. The soot was gone from his face, but she could see a small bandage on his left hand where he'd burned it on the doorframe. Their eyes met, and his entire face lit up. "You're the brave lady!" He ran toward her, then skidded to a stop a few feet away, suddenly shy. "You're okay. Dad said you were okay, but I wanted to see." Emily crouched down to his level, ignoring the pull of her healing shoulder. "I'm okay." "Are you okay?" "My hand hurts a little, but the doctor said it's going to be fine." Lucas held up the bandaged hand like a badge of honor. "You saved me from the fire. Dad showed me the video." "There's video?" Emily's eyes shot to Alexander. "Security footage from across the street," he said quietly. "I wanted Lucas to understand what you did for him." Lucas moved closer, his expression serious in that way kids got when they were trying to process something big. "You ran really fast, and when the fire fell on you, you didn't drop me. Why didn't you drop me?" The question was so direct, so innocent, that Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "Because you needed help. That's all that mattered." "But you got hurt. You didn't. That's what counts." Lucas processed this, then suddenly closed the distance and wrapped his arms around her neck in a fierce hug. Emily froze, not sure what to do, then slowly hugged him back. He smelled like kid shampoo and clean laundry and safety, things she'd almost forgotten existed. "Thank you for saving me," Lucas whispered against her shoulder. Emily's throat closed up. She managed a nod, not trusting her voice. When Lucas finally pulled back, his eyes were wet too. "Are you going to stay with us? Dad said maybe you could stay and help take care of me." "I want you to stay." "Lucas," Alexander said gently, "remember what we talked about? Miss Emily is just visiting today. We can't pressure her. But I want her to stay." Lucas looked between them, his lower lip trembling. "She's nice, and she's brave, and she doesn't look at me like the other nannies do." "How do they look at you?" Emily asked before she could stop herself. Lucas shrugged, a gesture too old for his 6 years. "Like I'm work, like they're getting paid to be here so they have to pretend to care. But you saved me when you didn't have to. That's different." "Out of the mouths of children." Emily glanced at Alexander, who looked like his son had just punched him in the gut. "The nannies cared about you," Alexander tried, but even he didn't sound convinced. "They cared about the money," Lucas corrected, with the blunt honesty of childhood. "It's okay, Dad. I know you're busy with work, but maybe Emily could stay, please?" Emily stood, her knees protesting. "Lucas, it's more complicated than that. Your dad and I barely know each other, and I'm not—" She gestured at herself, at the thrift store clothes and the still healing burns, and everything she was that didn't fit in this pristine apartment. "I'm not what you need." "You're exactly what he needs," Alexander said quietly. "What we both need." The certainty in his voice made her angry. He didn't know her. Didn't know about the night she'd spent so hungry she'd stolen food. Didn't know about the man who'd tried to assault her under the overpass and how she'd fought him off with a broken bottle. Didn't know about all the small ways surviving on the streets had chipped away at the person she used to be. "You don't know anything about me," she said, hearing her voice go sharp. "Then tell me. Tell us." Alexander gestured toward the living room. "You promised me one day. Stay. Have lunch with us. Let Lucas get to know you. Let me explain what I'm actually offering. After that, if you want to leave, I'll call you a car and give you enough money to get back on your feet somewhere else. But give us the day." Emily wanted to run. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that people like Alexander Bennett didn't help people like her without strings attached. But Lucas was looking up at her with those hopeful dark eyes, and she'd already survived fire this week. What was one uncomfortable lunch? "Fine," she said. "One day." Lucas cheered and grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the living room. His small fingers were warm and trusting, and Emily tried not to think about how long it had been since anyone had touched her with anything but suspicion or hostility. The living room was as expensive and empty as the rest of the apartment. Leather couch that looked uncomfortable. Coffee table with nothing on it. A massive TV mounted on the wall. The only sign that a child lived here was a corner where toys were neatly organized in bins. Too neatly, like someone had arranged them for a magazine photo shoot. "Are you hungry?" Alexander asked. "I had my chef prepare lunch." "You have a chef?" Emily couldn't keep the disbelief out of her voice. I have someone who comes in 3 times a week to meal prep. I can't cook to save my life, and Lucas needs to eat more than takeout. He looked embarrassed. I know how it sounds. It sounds like you have more money than you know what to do with. Probably true. Alexander's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. But at least let me feed you. You're too thin. Emily bristled. I'm surviving. You're starving. There's a difference. He said it matter-of-factly, without pity, which somehow made it worse. Lucas, why don't you show Emily your drawings while I set the table? Lucas immediately started pulling her toward the corner with the organized toys. I drew pictures of you. Well, I tried. Dad says I'm not very good at people yet, but I'm practicing. Alexander disappeared into the kitchen, and Emily let herself be led to a small desk where several pieces of paper were spread out. The drawings were exactly what you'd expect from a 6-year-old. Stick figures with triangle dresses, circular heads with wild scribbles for hair. But one of them clearly showed a larger figure holding a smaller one, surrounded by orange and red crayon fire. That's you saving me, Lucas explained proudly. See? That's the fire, and that's you being brave. And that's me being scared. Emily picked up the drawing, something cracking in her chest. Can I keep this? Lucas's eyes went wide. Really? You want it? If you'll let me. I've never had anyone draw a picture of me before. You can have all of them. Lucas started gathering the papers. I'll make you more too. Do you like horses? I'm learning to draw horses. I like horses. Emily hadn't thought about horses in years, but watching Lucas's face light up made it true. I used to ride when I was little, before... She stopped. Before her mother got sick. Before everything fell apart. Before what? Lucas asked. Before I grew up. It was the simplest truth she could offer. Alexander called from the kitchen that lunch was ready, and they moved to a dining table that could have seated 12 but was only set for 3. The food was simple. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, but it smelled better than anything Emily had encountered in months. She tried to eat slowly, tried not to inhale the food like the starving person she was, but her body had other ideas. Halfway through her second helping, she noticed Alexander watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked, defensive. Nothing. I'm just glad you're eating. He pushed the bread basket closer to her. There's plenty. Take as much as you want. Lucas was chattering about school, about his friends, about a field trip coming up that he was excited about. Normal kid stuff. Emily listened and responded and tried to remember what normal felt like. Miss Emily, Lucas said suddenly, do you have kids? The question hit like a fist. No, no kids. Do you want kids someday? Lucas, Alexander warned, that's personal. It's okay, Emily said, though it wasn't. I used to think I'd have kids. I was a teacher, 2nd grade. I loved working with children. Past tense, everything was past tense now. Why did you stop teaching? Lucas asked. Emily set down her fork, appetite suddenly gone. My mom got sick. I had to take care of her by the time she couldn't say died, not in front of this child who'd already lost his mother. By the time she was gone, I'd lost my job. That's not fair, Lucas said with the righteous indignation of childhood. No, it's not. Emily met Alexander's eyes across the table. But a lot of things aren't fair. You learn to deal with it. Or you accept help when it's offered, Alexander said quietly. Help always comes with strings. Not this time. Everything comes with strings. Emily pushed back from the table. Thank you for lunch. It was good. But I should go. You promised the whole day, Lucas protested. You can't leave yet. Lucas, if Miss Emily wants to leave, Alexander started. I don't want her to leave. She just got here. Lucas's voice rose, panic creeping in. Please don't go. Please. Everyone always leaves. The pain in those last 3 words stopped Emily cold. She looked at this little boy who'd lost his mother, who'd nearly died in a fire, who'd been through more trauma than any child should face, and she saw herself. Saw the same fear of abandonment, the same desperate need to hold on to anything good before it disappeared. She sat back down. Okay, she said. I'll stay. For the day. Like I promised. Lucas's relief was immediate and total. He climbed down from his chair and hugged her again. and Emily was starting to understand that this kid was a hugger. It was disarming and terrifying and something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. After lunch, Lucas dragged her to his room to show her his toys. The space was enormous, bigger than some apartments Emily had lived in. A race car bed, shelves full of books and action figures, a play area with a castle and dinosaurs. Everything a kid could want, except it all looked a little too new, a little too perfect. "Do you play with all of these?" Emily asked. Lucas shrugged. "Sometimes. Usually I just read or draw. Dad's at work a lot and the nannies don't really like playing." "They don't like playing?" Emily couldn't imagine taking care of a child and not playing with them. "They say it's messy, or they're looking at their phones." Lucas pulled out a box of Legos. "Do you like building things?" They spent the next hour building a spaceship that looked more like a mutant airplane, but Lucas thought it was perfect. He narrated an elaborate story about space pirates and alien planets, and Emily found herself getting pulled into the game, adding voices and sound effects until they were both laughing. She didn't notice Alexander in the doorway until Lucas ran to show him the spaceship. "Dad, look! Emily helped me make it. It has laser cannons and a hyperdrive and everything. It's very impressive." Alexander's voice was warm, genuine. His eyes met Emily's over Lucas's head, and something passed between them. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition. "Can Emily stay for dinner too?" Lucas asked. "Please, we're having spaghetti and she can help me practice using a fork without making a mess." "If Emily wants to stay," Alexander said carefully. Emily knew she should leave, knew she was getting too comfortable in this strange, expensive world that wasn't hers. But Lucas was looking at her with such hope, and she'd spent so many months being nothing to no one that being something to someone felt dangerously good. "I can stay for dinner," she heard herself say. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Lucas did make a mess with the spaghetti, getting sauce on his face and the table, and somehow his hair. Alexander was more relaxed than he'd been earlier, laughing at his son's antics, even cracking jokes. For a few hours, Emily almost forgot that this wasn't real, wasn't hers, would end when the day was over. After dinner, Lucas started yawning. Alexander checked his watch. "Bedtime, buddy. Say goodnight to Miss Emily." Lucas's face fell. "But I don't want her to leave." "She's not leaving right this second, but it's 8 o'clock and you have school tomorrow." Alexander's tone was gentle but firm. "Come on, let's get you in your pajamas." "Will you read me a story?" Lucas asked Emily. "Please? Just one?" Emily looked at Alexander, who nodded. "If you want to." She followed them to Lucas's room and sat on the edge of the race car bed while Lucas climbed under his covers. He handed her a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are, and Emily's throat tightened. Her mother used to read her this book. She made it through 3 pages before her voice started shaking. Alexander, sitting in a chair nearby, noticed. "I can finish if you need me to," he offered quietly. Emily shook her head and kept reading. Made it to the end. Lucas was drowsy by then, his eyes heavy. "Will you come back?" he murmured. "Tomorrow?" Emily didn't know how to answer that. "Just rest now," Alexander said, smoothing his son's hair. "We'll figure out tomorrow when it comes." Lucas nodded, already half asleep. Emily stood to leave, but his small hand caught hers. "Thank you for saving me, and for staying today. It was the best day." Something broke open in Emily's chest. She squeezed his hand gently. "It was a good day for me, too." By the time they made it back to the living room, Lucas was asleep. Alexander closed the door quietly behind them. "Thank you," he said. He hasn't been that happy in a long time. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware that she was alone with this man she barely knew. "He's a good kid." "He is, and he's been through too much." Alexander moved to the windows, staring out at the city lights. His mother, Sarah, she died when he was 3. Car accident, drunk driver. Lucas was in the car but survived without a scratch. He doesn't remember much about it, which is probably a blessing. "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate. "I threw myself into work after. Told myself I was building the company for him, securing his future. Really, I was just avoiding the grief." Alexander's reflection in the window looked haunted. "I hired nannies and tutors and therapists and convinced myself that was enough, that buying the best care was the same as being there, but it's not. The fire made me realize I almost lost him and I wasn't even there. I was in some stupid meeting about quarterly projections while my son was screaming for help. You can't blame yourself for that. Can I? He turned to face her. I should have been there, but I wasn't. You were. A stranger who had every reason to save herself first, and you didn't. You ran toward danger while I was 20 blocks away playing businessman. You didn't know there'd be a fire. That's not the point. The point is, I've been absent from my son's life, and it took almost losing him to see it. Alexander's jaw tightened. I don't want to be that parent anymore. I want to be present, but I also know I can't do it alone. Lucas needs more than I can give him right now. So you want to hire me? Emily said it flatly. To be what exactly? A nanny who's supposed to fix your guilt? No, he said it firmly. I want to hire you because Lucas trusts you, and trust can't be bought. I want to hire you because you understand loss and still chose to be brave anyway. I want to hire you because in one day you've given my son more genuine attention than any caretaker I've paid in 3 years. He paused. And yes, I want to help you get back on your feet, not as charity, as payment for something I can never truly repay. Emily wanted to believe him, wanted to believe this was real, that she could just step into this life and everything would be okay. But she'd learned the hard way that nothing was ever that simple. I'm not qualified to take care of a traumatized child, she said. I'm barely keeping myself together. Maybe that's exactly what makes you qualified. You know what it's like to hurt, to struggle, to survive when everything falls apart. Alexander took a step closer. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be present, to care about my son like you did when you ran into that fire. And what happens when you realize I'm not what you thought? When you see all the broken parts? Then we deal with it together. His voice was steady. Emily, I'm not offering you a job because I think you're perfect. I'm offering because I think you're real, and Lucas needs real more than he needs perfect. Emily closed her eyes. This was insane. Taking a job living in a billionaire's penthouse, caring for a child she'd just met, trying to rebuild a life from ashes. It was too much, too fast, too good to be true. But when she opened her eyes, Alexander was still standing there, waiting, not pushing, just offering. What exactly are you offering? She asked. Spell it out, no vague promises. Live in position. Your own room with private bathroom. Full salary. We can negotiate the exact amount, but enough that you can save, rebuild your credit, get back on your feet. Health insurance so you can get your shoulder properly treated. Flexible schedule. Your job is to be there for Lucas when I can't be, which is too often, and to help him feel safe. That's it. That's it? Emily laughed bitterly. Just upend my entire life and move in with strangers? Upend what life? The question was blunt but not cruel. Emily, you're sleeping in alleys and stealing antibiotics. I'm offering you safety, stability, and purpose. I know it's a huge leap of faith, but you took one when you ran into that fire. Take another one now. She wanted to. The wanting was so strong it scared her. To have a room again, to sleep in a real bed, to eat regular meals and shower whenever she wanted and not worry about someone attacking her in the night, to matter to someone. But wanting things had destroyed her before. I need to think about it, she said. Take all the time you need. Alexander pulled out his phone. I'm going to call my driver to take you wherever you want to go, but first, let me give you something. He disappeared down a hallway and returned with a phone, brand new, still in the box. It's programmed with my number and Lucas's iPad, so you can video call him if you want. No pressure, just so we can stay in touch while you decide. I can't accept this. You can and you will. He pressed it into her hands. Even if you decide not to take the job, you should have a phone. For emergencies. For safety. For being a human being in the 21st century. Emily stared at the box, then at him. Why are you doing this, really? Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Because I've spent 3 years hiding from grief by pretending money can solve everything. And you reminded me that the things that actually matter can't be bought. You gave me my son back. Let me give you a chance to find yourself again. The driver arrived, and Emily let herself be led to the elevator. At the last second, she turned back. I'll think about it, she said. I promise I'll really think about it. That's all I ask. Alexander smiled, tired but genuine. Good night, Emily, and thank you for today.
The elevator doors closed, and Emily rode down 43 floors, holding a phone she didn't deserve and a job offer that felt like a dream. The driver was professional and polite, didn't ask questions when she gave him the address of a shelter instead of an apartment. That night, lying on a cot in a room with 20 other women, Emily set up the phone. It took her 3 tries to figure out the video call feature. When Lucas's face appeared on the screen, Alexander must have been helping him. The boy's smile could have lit the entire shelter. "You called. Dad said you might." "I wanted to say goodnight properly," Emily said, her voice rough. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" "I don't know yet, Lucas. I'm still thinking." "Think fast," he said seriously, "because I already miss you." Alexander's voice came from off-screen. "Lucas, let Miss Emily rest. Say goodnight." "Good night, Emily. Sleep good. Dream about space pirates." "I will." Emily's throat was tight. "You too." The call ended, and Emily stared at the dark screen. Around her, women coughed and snored and whispered and cried. The same sound she'd been falling asleep to for months. The soundtrack of survival. She could go back to Alexander's penthouse. Could have silence and safety and a little boy who looked at her like she mattered. Or she could stay here, in the world she knew, where the only person she could disappoint was herself. Emily tucked the phone under her thin pillow and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would decide. Tonight she would just let herself imagine what it might feel like to have a home again. You said, Part 3, lưu ý. Viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, pha hồi thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Part 3, lưu ý. Viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, pha hồi thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, nhân vật không hoàn hảo, hồi thoại tự nhiên, tránh ngôn ngữ văn chương sáo rơi và cụm từ AI điển hình. Viết như nhà văn chuyên nghiệp, không như AI cố gắng nghe sang, có yếu tố con người, cầm miêu tả qua mượt mà và hoàn hảo, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau, câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document. Chỉ đắn bắt buộc không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện, điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí, không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Show more 925, Claude responded. Part 3. Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay on the cot, staring at the water-stained ceiling while the shelter's fluorescent lights hummed overhead and tried to talk herself out of what she already knew she was going to do. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake. You didn't move in with strangers, didn't accept jobs that sounded too good to be true, didn't let yourself hope for things that could be taken away. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. But around 4 in the morning, somewhere between a woman's nightmare-induced screaming and the staff doing bed checks with flashlights, Emily admitted the truth to herself. She was tired of surviving, tired of being invisible, tired of going to sleep every night wondering if she'd wake up at all. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted to see if that little boy's smile was real or if she'd imagined the way it made her chest feel less hollow. When the sun finally came up, she used the shelter's bathroom to make herself as presentable as possible, changed into the clean clothes she'd bought with Alexander's money, and stood outside the building with the phone in her hand for 10 full minutes before she found the courage to call. Alexander answered on the second ring. His voice was rough with sleep. "Emily? I'll take the job." The words came out fast before she could change her mind. "If the offer's still open, I'll take it." There was a pause, then she heard him exhale. "Thank you, yes. The offer's absolutely still open. When can you start?" "Is today too soon?" "Today's perfect. I'll send the car. Where are you?" She gave him the shelter's address and felt a strange mix of shame and relief. No more hiding where she'd been sleeping, no more pretending she had somewhere better to be. 40 minutes later,
The same driver from last night pulled up in a black sedan that probably cost more than her mother's entire medical bills. Emily climbed in with nothing but the clothes on her back and a phone she still couldn't quite believe was hers. The drive back to the penthouse felt different in daylight. She could see the city properly now, the contrast between neighborhoods, the way wealth and poverty existed blocks apart, the invisible lines that separated people who had everything from people who had nothing. She was crossing one of those lines, and the weight of it sat heavy in her stomach. Marcus, Alexander's head of security, was waiting in the lobby when she arrived. He was exactly what you'd expect. Military bearing, assessing eyes, his handshake that could crush concrete, but his voice was respectful when he spoke. "Miss Carter, Mr. Bennett asked me to handle your intake paperwork and security clearance. Should only take about 30 minutes, then you'll be free to settle in. Intake paperwork. Security clearance. The language of legitimate employment." Emily followed him to a private office off the lobby and spent the next half hour filling out forms that made her previous life feel like it belonged to someone else. Tax documents. Emergency contacts. She left that blank. Medical history. Background check authorization. "The background check," she said, pen hovering over the signature line. "I don't have much of a background anymore. No recent addresses, no references, no—" "Mr. Bennett's already waived the standard requirements," Marcus interrupted. "He ran you through our system himself last night. You're cleared." "He can just do that?" Marcus's expression didn't change. "He owns the company that designed our security protocols, so yes, he can do that." "Right. Billionaire." Emily signed the form. When she finally made it upstairs, Alexander was in the kitchen making breakfast while Lucas sat at the counter doing homework. The domestic scene was so normal it felt surreal. "Emily!" Lucas jumped down and ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You came back! I told Dad you would, but he said not to get my hopes up. But I knew it!" "Lucas, let her breathe," Alexander said, but he was smiling. He looked different this morning, still tired, but lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying something heavy and had just set it down. "Coffee? Please." Emily hadn't had real coffee in months. The stuff at Shelters was usually burnt or watered down or both. He poured her a cup in a mug that probably cost more than her old weekly grocery budget and pushed cream and sugar across the counter. The coffee was perfect. Everything in this apartment was perfect, and Emily had no idea how to exist in a perfect space without breaking something. "I had the guest room prepared for you," Alexander said. "It's down the hall, second door on the right. Private bathroom, closet space, whatever you need. Marcus will bring up some basics this afternoon. Toiletries, clothes in your size, that sort of thing. We can go shopping later this week for anything specific you want." "You don't have to buy me clothes." "Emily, you own exactly one outfit. I'm buying you clothes." He said it matter-of-factly, like this was a normal thing, and not charity that made her skin crawl. "Consider it part of the job. Lucas needs someone who can take him to the park, to school events, out in public. You need appropriate clothing for that." Before she could argue, Lucas tugged on her hand. "Do you want to see your room? Dad let me help pick out the bedspread. It's blue because I didn't know what color you liked, but we can change it if you want." The room was bigger than any bedroom Emily had ever had, even before she'd lost everything. Queen bed with a blue comforter that looked soft enough to drown in. Windows overlooking the city, a dresser, a desk, a bookshelf already stocked with novels. The attached bathroom had a tub, a shower, and more counter space than she knew what to do with. Lucas watched her face anxiously. "Do you like it?" "It's perfect," Emily managed, her throat tight. "Thank you for helping pick the bedspread." "You're welcome." His anxiety melted into pride. "Dad says you can decorate however you want. Put up pictures and stuff. Make it yours." Make it yours. Like this space could belong to her, like she deserved to claim something this nice. Alexander appeared in the doorway. "Lucas, finish your homework. The bus comes in 20 minutes. But I want to show Emily my room again." "After school, you'll have plenty of time." Alexander's tone was gentle but firm. "Go on." Lucas ran off, and suddenly Emily was alone with Alexander in a bedroom, which felt weird and intimate and wrong. She stepped toward the window, putting distance between them. "This is too much," she said quietly. "The room, the clothes, all of it. I don't need this much. Maybe not. But you deserve it anyway." He stayed in the doorway, giving her space. "Emily, I know this is overwhelming.
I know you're probably terrified that I'm going to turn out to be some kind of predator or that this whole thing is too good to be true, but I need you to understand something." She turned to face him. "I'm not doing this to control you or own you or whatever worst-case scenario you're imagining. I'm doing this because you saved my son, and I genuinely want to help you, and Lucas needs someone who gives a damn about him as a person instead of a paycheck. That's it. No hidden agenda, no strings." He paused. "Well, one string. You have to actually care about my kid. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. What if I screw this up?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "What if I'm not good enough, or I can't handle it, or then we figure it out together? Emily, I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I just need you to try." Alexander checked his watch. "I have to get Lucas to the bus and then head to the office. There's food in the fridge, help yourself to anything. I'll be back around 6. If you need anything, call me or Marcus." He left, and Emily stood in the middle of the room trying to process that this was real. This was her room now, her space, her job, her second chance at a life that didn't involve sleeping in alleys and wondering where her next meal would come from. She heard Lucas and Alexander leave, heard the apartment go quiet, and for the first time in months found herself completely alone in a safe space. Emily walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and stood under hot water until her skin turned red and the soap ran clear, and she finally believed that maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to be clean. The first week was harder than Emily expected and easier at the same time. Harder because living in the penthouse felt like wearing someone else's skin. Everything was too nice, too clean, too expensive. She was afraid to touch anything, afraid to mess up the perfect order, afraid that someone would realize she didn't belong and throw her back on the streets where she came from. She kept a bag packed under her bed, just in case. Old habit, but easier because Lucas made it easy. He came home from school every day and immediately found her chattering about his classes and his friends and the injustice of having to eat vegetables at lunch. He wanted her help with homework, wanted to show her his drawings, wanted her to build Legos and play pretend, and read him stories before bed. Being needed felt good. Dangerous, but good. Alexander kept his distance those first few days. He left for work early, came home late, usually after Lucas was already asleep. Emily knew he was giving her space to adjust, but it felt odd sharing an apartment with someone she barely saw. On the fourth night, she was reading in the living room when he came home around 9. He looked exhausted, tie loose, jacket over his arm. "You're still up," he said, surprised. "Couldn't sleep." Emily closed her book. "How was work?" "Long, tedious, the usual." He poured himself a drink from the bar cart, whiskey, neat, and collapsed onto the opposite end of the couch. "How was Lucas?" "Good. We went to the park after school. He made friends with a kid named Marcus, which confused your Marcus when I mentioned it on the phone." She smiled slightly. "He's in bed by 7:30. Read him 2 chapters of Harry Potter." 2? He usually only gets 1. He negotiated. Kid's got a future in business. Alexander laughed, a real laugh that transformed his tired face. "That's my son. Negotiating before he could walk." He took a sip of whiskey. "Thank you, for today, for all of it. He's been happier this week than I've seen him in months. He's a good kid, easy to care about." Most of the nannies didn't think so. They thought he was difficult. Too many questions, too much energy, too needy. Alexander's jaw tightened. "One of them actually told me I should consider medication to calm him down. He's 6. He's supposed to have energy." Emily felt anger spark in her chest. "He's not difficult. He's just a normal kid who wants attention, who wants someone to actually listen when he talks instead of just waiting for him to stop." I know that now. I didn't—" Alexander stopped, rubbed his face. "I didn't pay enough attention before. I trusted the professionals, assumed they knew better. I was so focused on work, on building the company, on making sure Lucas would be financially secure forever, that I missed the part where he just needed his dad to be present. You're here now. Not enough. I'm still at the office 12 hours a day while you do the actual parenting." He looked at her. "That's not fair to you. I'm being paid to do this. You shouldn't have to be. He's my son. I should be the one making him dinner and helping with homework and reading him bedtime stories." Alexander's voice went rough. "Sarah used to say I was married to the company. We'd fight about it.
She'd say I was missing Lucas growing up, and I'd promised to do better, and then I'd get caught up in some deadline or merger and break that promise. After she died, I threw myself into work even harder because it was easier than facing the grief. Easier than being alone in this apartment with a 3-year-old who kept asking when mommy was coming home. Emily didn't know what to say. She understood grief, understood using work or anything else to avoid feeling the crushing weight of loss. She'd done the same thing after her mother died, throwing herself into finding a new job, a new apartment, anything to avoid sitting still with the pain. "You're doing better now," she offered. "You hired me. You're trying to change." Trying isn't the same as succeeding. I still work too much. Still put business calls ahead of dinner time. Still let you carry the weight of raising my kid. Maybe that's okay? Emily set down her book. Maybe you don't have to be perfect. Maybe trying is enough. Alexander met her eyes, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Two broken people trying to survive their grief in different ways. "How's your shoulder?" he asked, changing the subject. Emily touched it reflexively. The burn was healing, the antibiotics had fought off the infection, but it still hurt. "Better, still sore." "Have you seen a doctor? A real one?" "I have health insurance now. I'll make an appointment." "Make it tomorrow. I'll have Marcus arrange everything, get you into the best dermatologist in the city. Burns can scar badly if they're not treated properly." "It's already going to scar." "Then we make sure it scars as minimally as possible." He said it with the same matter-of-fact tone he used for everything, like spending thousands on a dermatologist for his employee was just common sense. Emily wanted to argue, but found she was too tired. "Okay, tomorrow." They sat in silence for a while, him drinking whiskey, her trying to remember what normal conversation felt like. The apartment was quiet except for the ambient sounds of the city 43 floors below. "Can I ask you something?" Alexander said eventually. "Sure." "Why did you really say yes to the job? I know you needed help, but you could have just taken the money and disappeared. Why stay?" Emily considered lying, giving him an easy answer. But something about the late hour and his exhaustion and the way they were both damaged in complementary ways made her tell the truth. "Because I was tired of being no one, and Lucas made me feel like someone again." She met his eyes. "And maybe because I was curious to see if people like you really exist. People who actually mean it when they offer help." "Do I? Exist?" "I'm still figuring that out." Alexander smiled, sad and small. "Fair enough. I'm still figuring out how to be a decent father, so I guess we're both learning." He finished his drink and stood, setting the glass in the sink. "I'm going to try something new next week, leaving the office by 5. Being home for dinner, maybe even cooking, though I warn you, my skills stop at grilled cheese." "Lucas would love that. Would you?" The question was quiet, almost vulnerable. Emily realized with some surprise that she would, that having Alexander around more, getting to know him beyond the exhausted late-night version, actually sounded nice. "Yeah, I would." "Good. Then it's settled." He headed toward his room, then paused. "Emily, I'm glad you stayed. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. You being here, it's helping both of us." After he disappeared down the hallway, Emily sat in the silent living room and tried to remember the last time someone had been glad she existed. The memory wouldn't come. 2 weeks in, Emily made her first real mistake. She'd taken Lucas to the park like usual, was watching him on the swings while scrolling through her new phone, still getting used to having internet access again, when she looked up and he was gone. Panic hit immediately and totally. 1 second he was there, the next the swing was empty, and she couldn't see him anywhere in the crowded playground. "Lucas!" She was on her feet, spinning, heart hammering. "Lucas!" 30 seconds of pure terror. 45. A full minute of imagining having to tell Alexander she'd lost his son, imagining that little boy scared and alone or worse, imagining this whole fragile new life collapsing because she'd been distracted for 1 goddamn minute. Then she saw him, behind the slide, crouched down with another kid, examining something on the ground. Emily ran over, grabbed his shoulder harder than she meant to. "Don't do that. Don't disappear without telling me." Lucas looked up, startled by her tone. "I was just looking at this cool bug with Marcus." "I don't care about the bug. You can't just leave without telling me where you're going." Her voice came out sharp, scared, angry. I thought... She stopped. Lucas's eyes were wide, confused. The other kid had already backed away, and Emily realized she was gripping his shoulder too tight, was breathing too hard, was having a panic attack in the middle of a playground because a 6-year-old had walked 15 feet away. She forced herself to let go, to step back, to breathe. "I'm sorry," Lucas said in a small voice. "I didn't mean to scare you." "No, I'm sorry." Emily crouched to his level, her hands shaking. "I shouldn't have yelled. I just got scared when I couldn't see you. But you didn't do anything wrong. I overreacted. Are you okay?" The question coming from him instead of the other way around made her want to cry. "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay. Just had a moment." They finished at the park, but the easy joy was gone. Lucas was quiet on the walk home, and Emily hated herself for putting that worried look on his face. Alexander came home early that day, miracle of miracles, and found them in the living room. Lucas was doing homework. Emily was pretending to read. "How was the park?" he asked. Lucas looked at Emily, uncertain. She gave him a small nod. "Emily got really scared when I went to look at a bug," Lucas said carefully. "She yelled at me, but then she said sorry. I think maybe she thought I was lost." Alexander's eyes went to Emily. Not angry, just questioning. "Can I talk to you?" she asked quietly. "In private?" They went to the kitchen while Lucas stayed with his homework. Alexander leaned against the counter, waiting. "I screwed up today," Emily said. "He walked maybe 15 feet away and I couldn't see him for a minute, and I panicked, completely lost it. Grabbed him, yelled at him, probably scared the hell out of him." "Did you hurt him?" "No, just scared him and myself." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I thought I could do this, thought I was ready, but I'm not. I have too much baggage, too many issues. I can't even handle a kid playing at a playground without falling apart." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "My wife died in a car accident." The non sequitur threw her. "I know, you told me." "What I didn't tell you is that for 6 months after, I couldn't let Lucas out of my sight. Hired a bodyguard to follow him to preschool, installed GPS trackers on everything, had panic attacks every time he was 5 minutes late coming home." His voice was steady, but his eyes were haunted. "The therapist called it hypervigilance, trauma response. Whatever you want to call it, the point is, I understand what it's like to love someone and be terrified of losing them." "I don't love him. I barely know him." "Don't you?" Alexander's gaze was knowing. "Emily, you ran into a burning building for him before you knew his name. You care. That's not a weakness. It's why you're good at this." "I yelled at a 6-year-old because I have PTSD from living on the streets." "And then you apologized. You owned it. You didn't make it his fault." Alexander moved closer. "Look, I'm not saying what happened was ideal, but you're human. You're going to make mistakes. The question is whether you learn from them or let them destroy you." Emily felt tears threatening. "What if I can't do this? What if I'm too broken? Then you'd be in good company because I'm pretty broken too. So is Lucas. We're all just doing our best with what we've got." He touched her shoulder gently, careful of the burn scar. "Talk to someone. I have a therapist on retainer. I'll set you up with appointments. This job comes with mental health support because I'm not an idiot and I know you've been through hell. I don't need therapy. Everyone needs therapy, especially people who say they don't need therapy." He smiled slightly. "Please. For me. For Lucas. For yourself." Emily wanted to argue but couldn't find the energy. "Fine. I'll try therapy. Thank you." Alexander squeezed her shoulder once, then let go. "Now come on. Lucas made you an apology card. Apparently he feels bad for worrying you, which means you both apologized to each other and you're basically already better at communication than most adults I know." The card was crayon on construction paper, a stick figure with wild hair holding hands with a smaller stick figure surrounded by hearts and flowers. "I'm sorry I scared you. Love, Lucas," in his careful first-grade handwriting. Emily pressed it to her chest and let herself cry while Alexander made dinner and Lucas chattered about the cool bug, and the apartment slowly started to feel less like a borrowed space and more like something that might be home. The therapy helped even though Emily hated admitting it. Dr. Sarah Chen was in her 50s, kind without being pitying, and had a way of asking questions that made Emily actually think instead of just deflecting. "You're experiencing hypervigilance as a trauma response.
Dr. Chen said during their third session. Between your mother's illness, losing your stability, months on the streets, and then the fire, your nervous system is stuck in survival mode. It's going to take time to teach your brain that you're safe now. I don't feel safe, Emily admitted. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for Alexander to decide I'm not worth the trouble, for Lucas to realize I'm just some homeless person he doesn't actually need. Do you think that's how they see you? I don't know how they see me. I don't understand why they want me here. Dr. Chen leaned forward. What if you tried believing them when they tell you? It sounded simple. It wasn't. But Emily started trying, started letting herself buy things with the salary Alexander paid her, real clothes, not just thrift store finds. Started decorating her room with photos and books. Started eating dinner with them every night instead of retreating to her room. Started believing, just a little bit, that maybe this wasn't temporary. Lucas helped. He had a way of being completely honest that cut through her self-doubt. I like having you here, he told her one night while she was tucking him in. The other nannies were nice, but they didn't really see me. You see me. What do you mean? Like when I'm sad about Mom, they used to say, don't be sad or try to distract me. But you just let me be sad. And you tell me it's okay to miss her. He played with the edge of his blanket. I think you get it because you miss your mom too. Emily's throat tightened. Yeah, buddy, I do. Does it get better? The missing? She wanted to lie, to tell him it would stop hurting someday. But Lucas deserved honesty. It gets different. Some days are better than others, but the people we love, we carry them with us always. That's not a bad thing. Dad says Mom would have liked you. Yeah? Yeah. He said Mom always wanted him to find someone who cared more about people than money. Someone real. Lucas yawned. I think you're real. After he fell asleep, Emily found Alexander in his study going over contracts. She knocked on the open door. Lucas said something tonight about his mom. Alexander looked up, immediately alert. Is he okay? He's fine. Just... Emily leaned against the doorframe. He said you told him she would have liked me. I did tell him that because it's true. Alexander set down his pen. Sarah was a social worker, spent her career advocating for people society ignored. She would have loved that you didn't let being homeless stop you from saving a child, would have loved that you're honest with Lucas about grief instead of pretending it doesn't exist. You don't know that. I know my wife. Knew her. He corrected himself, pain flickering across his face. And I know she'd be glad Lucas has you. Emily wanted to ask what else he'd told his son about her, but Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at it, sighed. Tokyo office. I have to take this. It's almost midnight. Billionaire problems. He said it ironically, but picked up anyway. This is Bennett. Emily left him to his call and wandered back to the living room. Through the windows, the city stretched endlessly, lights flickering like stars. Somewhere down there, people were sleeping in alleys and under bridges. People who used to have homes, lives, dignity. People like she'd been just weeks ago. The distance between that world and this one felt impossible, like she'd crossed into some alternate dimension where she was allowed to be warm and fed and safe. Her phone buzzed, a text from Alexander. I'm sorry, this call's going to run late. Thank you for everything today. You're doing great. Emily stared at the message. No one had told her she was doing great in so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to hear. She typed back, You too. Good night. Then she went to her room with the blue bedspread and the photos on the wall and the window overlooking everything she used to be locked out of, and let herself believe just for tonight that maybe she belonged here after all. 1/2. You said, Part 4. Louis, viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, phá hồi thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Part 4. Louis, viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, pha hồi thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, nhân vật không hoàn hảo, hội thoại tự nhiên,
Tránh ngôn ngữ văn chương sáo rơi và cụm từ AI điển hình. Viết như nhà văn chuyên nghiệp, không như AI cố gắng nghe sang. Có yếu tố con người, cấm miêu tả qua mượt mà và hoàn hảo. Kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau, câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document. Chi đan bắt buộc không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí, không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật, không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Showmore 931. Claude responded, Part 4. Part 4. 3 months into living in the penthouse, Emily woke up one morning and realized she'd stopped keeping the emergency bag packed under her bed. She wasn't sure when it had happened. Somewhere between Lucas's 7th birthday party, which she'd helped plan, complete with a superhero theme and 20 screaming kids, and the night Alexander had come home early with takeout, and they'd all eaten dinner together on the living room floor because Lucas wanted a picnic. Somewhere between therapy sessions where Dr. Chen kept pushing her to acknowledge progress and the morning she'd caught herself humming while making breakfast. The realization should have felt good. Instead, it terrified her. Because the moment you stopped preparing for disaster was the moment disaster found you. She was thinking about this while walking Lucas home from school, only half listening to his story about a kid named Tyler who'd brought a lizard for show and tell when she saw him. A man from the streets. Danny, she thought his name was. Older guy, maybe 60, with a gray beard and layers of clothing that marked him as someone still surviving out there. He was standing near the entrance to a subway station, holding a cardboard sign, and their eyes met for just a second. Recognition flared, not just of each other, but of what they'd both been, what Emily was still trying to escape. Emily, Lucas tugged her hand. You stopped walking. Sorry, buddy. She forced her feet to move, but she could feel Danny's gaze following her. Watched her walk into the building with the doorman who nodded respectfully. Watched her disappear into the world of people who had homes and clean clothes and children who went to private schools. The look in his eyes wasn't angry, just sad. Knowing. You're one of us, it said. You'll always be one of us. That night, Emily couldn't eat dinner. She pushed food around her plate while Lucas chattered, and Alexander asked about her day, and she felt like a fraud. Like she was playing house in someone else's life. You okay? Alexander asked quietly while Lucas was distracted with dessert. Fine, just tired. His eyes said he didn't believe her, but he let it go. Later, after Lucas was asleep, Emily stood at her bedroom window looking down at the city. Somewhere down there, Danny was finding a place to sleep for the night. Somewhere down there, dozens of people she'd known were huddling under bridges and in doorways, surviving another day. And she was up here, safe, warm, fed. The guilt felt like drowning. She didn't hear Alexander come in until he spoke. I saw you freeze on the security footage, outside when you were walking Lucas home. What happened? Emily's hands tightened on the window frame. Of course there was security footage. Rich people and their cameras everywhere. Saw someone I knew, from before. She didn't turn around. Just reminded me where I came from. Does that bother you? Shouldn't it? I'm up here living like this while people I knew are still down there with nothing. Her voice cracked. What makes me special? Why do I get saved when they don't? Alexander was quiet for a moment. Then he moved to stand beside her, looking out at the same view. Survivor's guilt. I had it after Sarah died. Kept asking why I got to live when she didn't. Why Lucas survived without a scratch when she didn't make it. What did you do about it? Therapy. Time. And eventually realizing that guilt doesn't help anyone. That the best way to honor the ones who didn't make it is to actually live the life you've been given. He glanced at her. You saved my son. That makes you special to us. Maybe that's enough. Is it? I don't know. You tell me. Emily pressed her forehead against the cool glass. I feel like I'm forgetting who I was. Like I'm erasing the person who survived all that just to fit into this new life. You're not erasing her. You're healing her. Alexander's voice was gentle. There's a difference. Before Emily could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Emily Carter? A woman's voice, professional. This is Jennifer Martinez from Community Outreach Services. I'm calling about a shelter resident who listed you as an emergency contact. Margaret Chen? Emily's blood went cold. Maggie. The woman who'd helped her after the fire. Is she okay? She's in the hospital, St. Michael's, pneumonia. It's serious, and she's asking for you. Emily ended the call with shaking hands. I have to go. She was already moving toward her room, grabbing her jacket. Someone I know from before. She's in the hospital. I'll drive you, Alexander said immediately. You don't have to. Oh, Emily, it's 11 o'clock at night, and you're clearly upset. I'm driving you. His tone left no room for argument. Let me just check on Lucas. 20 minutes later, they were in Alexander's car heading toward a part of the city he probably never visited. St. Michael's was a public hospital, the kind that treated people without insurance, without homes, without resources. The waiting room was crowded even this late. People with injuries and illnesses they'd waited too long to treat. People who had nowhere else to go. Emily felt Alexander tense beside her as they walked through. His expensive suit and watch marked him as someone who didn't belong here, just like her clean clothes and healthy appearance marked her as someone who'd escaped. She found Maggie in a shared room on the 3rd floor. The older woman looked smaller than Emily remembered, fragile in the hospital bed with tubes and monitors attached. Her breathing was labored, rattling. Emily. Maggie's voice was weak, but her eyes brightened. You came. Of course I came. Emily pulled a chair close, took Maggie's hand. The skin was papery, cold. What happened? Been coughing for weeks. Didn't think much of it until I couldn't breathe. Maggie managed a weak smile. Stupid, huh? Surviving 3 years on the streets just to get taken out by a chest cold. You're not getting taken out by anything. The doctors are going to fix you up. The doctors say I need to stay somewhere warm and dry for at least a month. Take medication on schedule. Rest. Maggie's laugh turned into a cough. Where exactly am I supposed to do that? The shelter kicks you out at 6 a.m. Can't exactly rest under an overpass. Emily's chest tightened. She looked back at Alexander, who'd stayed near the door. He met her eyes and gave a small nod. You'll stay with us, Emily said. When you're discharged. We have space. Emily, I can't. Yes, you can. You helped me when I needed it. Let me help you now. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to be a burden. You won't be. I promise. Emily squeezed her hand. Just focus on getting better. They stayed another hour until Maggie drifted off to sleep. In the car on the way home, Alexander was quiet for a long time. Thank you, Emily said finally, for saying yes. I know I probably should have asked first before offering. You did the right thing. Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I've been living in my bubble for too long. Tonight was a reminder that most people don't get to be rescued the way you were, the way Lucas was. If we can help one more person, we should. She's going to need medical care, medication, time to recover. We'll handle it. I'll have Marcus set up the second guest room tomorrow. We'll get her whatever she needs. He glanced at Emily. You're building something here. A family, maybe. Not the traditional kind, but the kind that matters. Emily thought about that word. Family. Her mother was gone. She had no siblings, no relatives she was close to. For months, family had meant nothing more than a memory of what she'd lost. But Lucas running to hug her when she came home, Alexander making sure she ate dinner, Maggie asking for her when she was sick. Maybe that was family too. The people who showed up, the people who cared. I'm scared, she admitted quietly, of getting too comfortable, of forgetting what it's like out there, of becoming someone who doesn't understand anymore. Then don't forget, use it. Help people the way you were helped. Alexander pulled up to their building. You have a second chance, Emily. Don't waste it feeling guilty. Use it to make a difference. Maggie moved into the penthouse 2 days later, and if Emily thought her own adjustment had been difficult, watching Maggie navigate wealthy domesticity was almost painful. The older woman stood in the guest room doorway for a full 5 minutes before she'd even step inside. This is too much, she kept saying. I can't accept this. You're accepting it, Emily said firmly. Doctor's orders. Warm, dry place for a month. This qualifies. Lucas was fascinated by their new guest. He peppered Maggie with questions about living outside, about where she'd slept, about what it was like. Emily expected Maggie to be uncomfortable, but instead she answered honestly, treating him like the intelligent kid he was. "Wasn't it scary?" Lucas asked one afternoon while they were all in the living room. "Sometimes. But you learn to be brave when you have to be." Maggie smiled at him, kind of like how you were brave in that fire. Emily was the brave one. "Emily learned from the best," Maggie said, winking at Emily. Alexander came home early that day and found all four of them having an impromptu tea party Lucas had organized. Real tea in expensive cups served with cookies the chef had left. Lucas was explaining the rules. Apparently stuffed animals had to be addressed formally, while Maggie played along with complete seriousness. He stood in the doorway watching, and Emily saw something in his expression shift, like a wall coming down. Like he was seeing his home full of life for the first time in years. "Room for one more?" he asked. Lucas jumped up. "Dad, you're home. You have to be Sir Barrington. He needs someone to play him because I'm the Duke." "I'll try my best to do Sir Barrington justice." Alexander sat down, loosened his tie, and accepted a teacup from his son. Emily caught his eye over Lucas's head. He mouthed, "Thank you," and she realized he wasn't thanking her for taking care of Lucas. He was thanking her for reminding him what home was supposed to feel like. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm Emily had never experienced. She and Maggie would make breakfast while Lucas got ready for school. Alexander started coming home by 6 most days, eating dinner with them, helping with homework. Maggie told stories from her life before the streets. She'd been a nurse once, had raised 3 kids, had a whole life before circumstances destroyed it. "What happened?" Emily asked one night after Lucas was asleep. They were in the kitchen, Maggie making tea while Emily loaded the dishwasher. "Husband died. No life insurance, medical bills, lost the house. By the time I tried to ask my kids for help, they'd written me off as a failure." Maggie's voice was matter of fact. "Couldn't blame them, really. I'd always been the strong one. Seeing me fall apart probably scared them." "That's not an excuse for abandoning you." "No, it's not. But people do what they do. I learned to survive without them." She poured hot water over tea bags. "The streets teach you who you really are. Strip away all the pretense. You either break or you find out you're stronger than you thought." "Which one are you?" "Both, at different times." Maggie handed Emily a cup. "What about you? You seem to be finding your feet here." Emily leaned against the counter, cradling the warm mug. "I don't know what I'm doing. Some days I feel like I belong. Others I feel like an imposter, waiting to be discovered." "That's normal. You went through trauma. You don't just bounce back from that." Maggie studied her. "But you're doing the work. I see you with Lucas, with Alexander. You're building something real. I'm just his employee." "Honey, I've been here 3 weeks, and even I can see that's not true anymore." Maggie's smile was knowing. "That man looks at you like you hung the moon, and you look at him like you're scared to admit you care." Emily's face heated. "It's not like that. He's my boss, Lucas's father. We're just living in the same house, raising a kid together, having family dinners every night." Maggie laughed. "Sure, just that." Before Emily could argue, Alexander appeared in the doorway. His hair was wet from a shower. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt instead of his usual suit, and he looked more relaxed than Emily had ever seen him. "Am I interrupting?" he asked. "Not at all," Maggie said, standing. "I was just heading to bed. These old bones need their rest. Good night, kids." She left with a pointed look at Emily that said this conversation wasn't over. Alexander poured himself tea and sat at the kitchen island. "She doing okay, Maggie?" "Better every day. The medication's working. She's putting on weight." Emily stayed where she was, maintaining distance. "Thank you again for letting her stay." "Stop thanking me. This is your home too. You can invite whoever you want." "Your home too." The words hit harder than they should have. "Can I ask you something?" Alexander said after a moment. "Sure. Are you happy? Here, I mean, with this arrangement?" The question caught her off guard. "Why are you asking?" "Because I want to make sure this is working for you. That you're not just staying because you feel obligated or because you don't have anywhere else to go." He met her eyes. "I want you to want to be here." Emily set down her mug carefully. "I do want to be here. That's what scares me." "Why does that scare you?" "Because wanting things has never worked out for me. Because every time I let myself care about something, it gets taken away. Her voice cracked. My mom, my job, my home. Everything I've ever wanted, I've lost. So wanting to be here, wanting this to be real, it terrifies me. Alexander stood, moved closer. Not touching, just present. I can't promise you'll never lose anything again. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise that as long as you want to be here, you have a place. Not because you saved Lucas, not because I feel guilty, because you've become important to us. To me. The air between them felt charged. Emily's heart was racing. Alexander, You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. He stepped back, giving her space again. Good night, Emily. He left, and Emily stood alone in the kitchen trying to process what had just happened, trying to figure out when her boss had become something more, when this job had become a life she didn't want to lose. The answer, she realized, was probably the first day, when Lucas had hugged her and Alexander had looked at her like she mattered. She'd just been too scared to admit it. The shift after that conversation was subtle but undeniable. Alexander started coming home earlier, started asking her opinion on things beyond Lucas's care. They'd stay up late talking after Lucas went to bed, sharing stories about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Emily learned that Alexander had built his company from nothing, that he'd grown up poor and worked his way through college, that his drive for success came from never wanting to be helpless again. He learned that Emily had wanted to be a teacher since she was 8, that she'd loved her mother fiercely, that she still had nightmares about the streets. Maggie watched them dance around each other with barely concealed amusement. You two are ridiculous, she said one morning while they were making breakfast and Alexander was in his study on a call. We're not anything, Emily protested. Right, that's why you blush every time he walks in a room. That's why he specifically asks what you're cooking for dinner. That's why Lucas keeps asking if you're going to be his new mom. Emily nearly dropped the egg she was cracking. He what? Asked me yesterday if you and his dad were going to get married. Said it would make sense since you already live together and act married. Maggie grinned. Kid's not wrong. Maggie, I can't. It's not appropriate. He's my employer. So quit. Then he's just a man and you're just a woman, and that little boy gets 2 parents who love him. I don't... Emily stopped because she couldn't finish that sentence. Couldn't say she didn't love Lucas when she so clearly did. Couldn't say she didn't have feelings for Alexander when her chest tightened every time he smiled. It's okay to want this, Maggie said gently. It's okay to let yourself be happy. But before Emily could respond, Lucas ran into the kitchen in his pajamas. Emily, Dad wants to know if you can come to my school thing on Friday. They're having a family day and I want you both to come, please? Family day. Both of them. Like they were his parents. Emily looked at Lucas's hopeful face and felt something crack open in her chest. Of course I'll come, buddy. Family day turned out to be both wonderful and complicated. Emily stood with Alexander watching Lucas participate in various activities, relay races, art presentations, a small play where he was a tree. Other parents assumed they were married, and neither of them corrected it. Your son is adorable, one mother said to Emily. How old is he? 7, just turned. The lie came easily. Or maybe it wasn't a lie anymore. Alexander's hand found the small of her back as they moved to the next station, and Emily didn't pull away. They looked like a family, felt like a family, and for a few hours, Emily let herself pretend it was real. On the drive home, Lucas fell asleep in the back seat. Alexander glanced at Emily in the passenger seat. Thank you for coming today. I wanted to be there. I know, that's what makes it matter. He paused at a red light. Emily, I need to tell you something. Her heart started racing. Okay. I'm falling for you. Maybe already fell. I don't know exactly when it happened, but somewhere between you moving in and now, you stopped being just Lucas's caretaker and became... He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. Everything. You became everything. Emily couldn't breathe. Alexander, I know it's complicated. I know I'm your employer and this crosses lines and maybe I shouldn't say anything, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this. Tired of watching you leave the room every night and wishing you'd stay. The light turned green. He drove, and Emily sat in silence trying to process what he'd just said. I feel it too, she finally whispered. I've been feeling it for a while, but I'm scared. Of what? of losing this, of it not being real, of waking up and finding out this was all too good to be true. Her voice broke. I've lost everything before, Alexander. I don't know if I can survive losing this. He pulled over, put the car in park, turned to face her. Then we don't lose it. We build it stronger. We make it real enough that it can't be taken away. How? By being honest. By admitting this is more than a job. By figuring out what we're building here, you, me, Lucas, even Maggie. We're already a family. We just haven't said it out loud yet. Emily looked at Lucas sleeping in the back seat, peaceful and safe. Looked at Alexander, this man who'd saved her as much as she'd saved his son. Looked at her own reflection in the window and barely recognized the woman staring back. She wasn't the broken person who'd slept in alleys anymore. Wasn't the desperate woman who'd run into fire with nothing to lose. She was someone who had everything to lose now, which made her both stronger and more terrified than she'd ever been. I want this to be real, she said finally. I want us to be real. Alexander's smile was like sunrise. He reached for her hand, threaded his fingers through hers. Then let's be real. They sat there for a long moment, hands clasped, 7-year-old sleeping in the back, the future uncertain but possible. When they got home, Maggie took one look at their faces and grinned. About damn time. That night, after Lucas was asleep, Emily and Alexander sat on the couch talking until almost midnight. Not about logistics or what this meant for her job or how they'd navigate the complexities. Just talking. About Sarah and how Alexander would always love her but had room in his heart for something new. About Emily's mother and how she'd want her daughter to be happy. About Lucas and how he deserved to see love modeled in healthy ways. I'm still going to mess up, Emily said. I'm still going to have bad days and panic attacks and moments where I feel like I don't deserve any of this. And I'm still going to work too much sometimes and struggle with being present and probably make terrible decisions. Alexander pulled her closer. But we'll figure it out together. Emily rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat steady against her cheek. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the fear in her chest was smaller than the hope. Together, she agreed. And somewhere in the other guest room, Maggie smiled and went to sleep, knowing the broken people she'd watched struggle were finally letting themselves heal. You said, Part 5, lưu ý. Viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu liền mạch khi ghép lại. Part 5, lưu ý. Viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyến uyển ở đầu phần mới, liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần, duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc, kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ độ kịch tính không viết lan man, có quan điểm cá nhân, thông điệp, bài học, góc nhìn con người. Nhân vật không hoàn hảo, hội thoại tự nhiên, tránh ngôn ngữ văn chương sáo rơi và cụm từ AI điển hình. Viết như nhà văn chuyên nghiệp, không như AI cố gắng nghe sang, có yếu tố con người, cầm miêu tả qua mướt mà và hoàn hảo. Phần 5 giải quyết hết vấn đề và kết thúc trọn vẹn câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document. Chi đàn bắt buộc không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyện. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí, không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật, không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu.
Show more. 9:34. Claude responded, Part 5, Part 5. The morning after their conversation in the car, Emily woke up expecting everything to feel different. But when she walked into the kitchen, Alexander was making coffee like he did every morning, and Lucas was eating cereal while reading a comic book, and Maggie was doing the crossword puzzle from yesterday's newspaper. The same routine they'd fallen into over the past months. Except when Alexander handed her a mug, his fingers brushed hers deliberately, and his smile was softer than usual. "Sleep okay?" he asked. "Better than I have in years." It was true. For the first time since moving into the penthouse, she hadn't woken up at 3 a.m. in a panic, checking to make sure it was all real.
Lucas looked up from his comic. Are you guys being weird? No, they said simultaneously, which only made them look more suspicious. Lucas squinted at them. You're smiling different, both of you. Maggie laughed into her coffee. Kid's too smart for his own good. I'm 7.5 now, Lucas said with the gravity of someone announcing a doctorate. I notice things, like how Emily looks at Dad when he's not looking, and how Dad asks me if Emily seems happy like 100 times a day. Emily felt her face heat. Alexander looked equally caught. Okay, buddy, Alexander said carefully. What if I told you that Emily and I like each other? Like more than just friends or people who live together? Lucas set down his spoon. His expression went serious in that way kids did when processing something important. Like how you liked Mom. The question landed heavy. Alexander's smile faltered, and Emily saw him struggle for words. Different from how I loved your mom, he said finally. Your mom will always be special to me. Always. But people can love more than one person in their life, and that doesn't make the first love less important. It just means the heart has room to grow. Lucas considered this. So you love Emily? Alexander looked at Emily, and she saw the truth in his eyes, even though they hadn't said those words to each other yet. Yeah, I do. And Emily loves you back? Emily's throat tightened. She could dodge the question, make it easier on everyone, or she could be honest with this kid who'd already been through too much dishonesty in his short life. Yeah, Lucas, I do. Lucas broke into a grin so wide it looked like it might split his face. Good. Because I already told Tyler at school you were basically my mom, and it would be really embarrassing if I was wrong. The casual way he said it made Emily's eyes sting with tears. Basically my mom. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Come here, she said, and Lucas ran over. She hugged him tight, this little boy who'd somehow become hers. You're stuck with me now. Hope you know that. Good. You make better pancakes than Dad anyway. Hey, Alexander protested, but he was laughing. Maggie stood gathering her dishes. I'm going to give you 3 some privacy, but for the record, I'm officiating the wedding. Already called it. Maggie, Emily's face was burning. What? I'm old. I say what I want. She winked and disappeared toward her room. Lucas looked between them. Are you getting married? We just figured out we like each other yesterday, Alexander said. Maybe let's slow down a little. But you're going to eventually, right? Because that's what people do when they love each other and live together and have a kid. Emily caught Alexander's eye. They hadn't talked about any of this, marriage, the future, what they were building beyond acknowledging feelings. But looking at Lucas's hopeful face, she realized the future was already here. They were already living it. How about we take things one step at a time, Alexander suggested. First step, we all agree we're a family now. Real family. Does that work? Lucas nodded enthusiastically. Can I tell people at school Emily's my mom now? Emily's heart felt too big for her chest. If you want to, but Lucas, you know I'm not trying to replace your real mom, right? She'll always be your mom. I'm just an extra mom. I know. Tyler has 2 dads and they're both his real dads. I can have 2 moms even if one of them is gone. Lucas said it so matter-of-factly, like he'd already worked through this logic. It's not weird. It's just how families work sometimes. Out of the mouths of children. Emily pulled him close again, overwhelmed by how simple he made it sound. How uncomplicated love could be when you stopped overthinking it. The next few weeks were an adjustment of a different kind. Alexander moved slower at work, delegated more, actually used the executive team he'd assembled instead of trying to control everything himself. He made it home for dinner almost every night, helped with homework, read bedtime stories, became the father Lucas had needed instead of the absent workaholic he'd been. Emily watched him transform and realized he was doing what she'd done, learning to live instead of just survive. Learning that success meant more than money and power, that the moments that mattered were the small ones. Lucas's laugh at dinner, Maggie's terrible jokes, Emily's hand in his while they watched a movie after Lucas went to bed. But not everything was smooth. Old wounds didn't heal overnight. Emily had a panic attack in a grocery store 6 weeks into their relationship. They'd gone as a family, her, Alexander, Lucas, and she'd turned the corner to see Danny, the man from the street she'd recognized before. He was talking to a store manager, probably getting kicked out for loitering. Their eyes met again. This time, Danny smiled, sad but genuine. "You made it out," he said quietly as he passed. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. "Don't be. Someone should." But the guilt swallowed her anyway. She made it to the car before the panic hit. Chest tight, can't breathe, the world closing in. Alexander found her there, sent Lucas inside with Maggie, and just held her while she shook. "I left them all behind," she gasped. "All the people still out there. I just saved myself and left them." "You didn't just save yourself. You saved Lucas. You're helping Maggie. You're building something that can help more people." His voice was steady, grounding. "But Emily, you can't save everyone. You can only do what you can do. It's not enough. Then let's make it enough. Let's do more." That conversation led to the foundation. Alexander had money. Emily had experience. Together, they built something that mattered. The Bennett Carter Foundation, focused on helping homeless individuals transition back into housing and employment. They hired social workers, partnered with shelters, created programs that addressed the actual barriers people faced. No permanent address, no clean clothes for interviews, no access to mental health care. Emily insisted they hire people with lived experience, former homeless individuals who understood the system from the inside. Danny was one of their first employees working as an outreach coordinator. Maggie, once she was fully recovered, became a program advisor. "You're building an empire," Maggie teased one night over dinner. "Just a different kind than Alexander's used to." "It's not an empire. It's just trying to help." Emily pushed food around her plate, still uncomfortable with praise. "It's more than that," Alexander said quietly. "You're changing lives, giving people what you needed when you were out there. Not just charity, but actual opportunity." The foundation became Emily's purpose beyond Lucas and the family they'd built. She threw herself into it with the same intensity she'd once used to survive. But this time the energy came from hope instead of desperation. 8 months after that conversation in the car, Alexander proposed. He did it badly, which somehow made it perfect. They were at the park with Lucas, watching him play on the swings, when Alexander just turned to her and said, "Marry me." No ring, no elaborate setup, just those 2 words. Emily stared at him. "That's it? That's your proposal?" "I've been carrying a ring around for 2 weeks trying to plan something perfect, and I realized perfect doesn't matter. This matters. You, me, Lucas, us." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I love you. Lucas loves you. Maggie will kill me if I don't make this official. So marry me, please." The ring was simple. Silver band with a small diamond. Beautiful because it was real, not because it was expensive. "You're terrible at this," Emily said, crying and laughing at the same time. "Is that a yes?" "Yes, you idiot. Of course it's yes." Lucas noticed them kissing and came running over. "Did you ask her? Did she say yes?" "She said yes," Alexander confirmed. Lucas whooped so loud half the park turned to look. He hugged them both, bouncing with excitement. "I knew it. I totally knew it. Wait until I tell Tyler." They got married 3 months later. Small ceremony, just close friends and the people who mattered. Maggie officiated like she'd promised, making terrible jokes that had everyone crying with laughter. Lucas was the ring bearer and took his job so seriously he practiced walking down the aisle for a week beforehand. Emily wore a simple dress, nothing fancy. Alexander wore a suit but ditched the tie halfway through because Lucas said it looked too formal. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises to show up, to be present, to build something real together. "I promise to let you help me even when I'm scared," Emily said, her voice shaking. "I promise to believe I deserve this, and I promise to love your son like my own, because he already is." "I promise to come home," Alexander said. "Not just physically, but emotionally. To be present for you and Lucas. To build a life that matters more than any business success." He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "And I promise to spend every day proving you made the right choice when you ran into that fire. Because saving Lucas saved me too." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The reception was at the penthouse, now their home, not just Alexander's. They'd redecorated over the months, making it less sterile and more lived in. Photos on the walls, Lucas's artwork hung with the expensive pieces, Maggie's knitting supplies in the corner, evidence that people actually existed in the space. Danny showed up with flowers he'd clearly spent too much money on. For the woman who showed me, it's possible to make it out. You made it out too, Emily reminded him. You're helping people now. That matters. Only because you gave me the chance. He hugged her carefully. Thank you for not forgetting where you came from. Emily watched the party, Lucas running around with other kids from the Foundation's programs, Maggie holding court with stories about Emily's early days in the penthouse, Alexander laughing with Marcus about something ridiculous, and felt the weight of how far she'd come. A year and a half ago, she'd been sleeping in alleys, stealing food, wondering if she'd survive another week. Now she was married to a man who looked at her like she hung the moon, raising a boy who called her mom without hesitation, running a foundation that had already helped dozens of people find their way back. The journey between those 2 points hadn't been smooth. There'd been panic attacks and setbacks, and moments where she'd wanted to run back to the familiar pain of the streets, because at least that hurt was predictable. But she'd stayed. She'd fought through the fear and the guilt and the bone-deep certainty that she didn't deserve happiness. And somewhere along the way, she'd learned that deserving had nothing to do with it. Life wasn't fair. She'd learned that the hard way. But sometimes, if you were lucky enough and brave enough and stubborn enough, you got a second chance anyway. Later that night, after the guests had left and Lucas was asleep, Emily and Alexander stood on the balcony looking out at the city, the same view she'd stared at months ago, feeling like an imposter. Now it just felt like home. Do you ever miss it? Alexander asked quietly. The simplicity of before, when life was just survival. Emily considered the question. Sometimes, not the pain or the fear, but the clarity. When you're surviving, you know exactly what matters. Food, shelter, safety. Now everything's more complicated. Is that bad? No, it's just different, scary in new ways. She leaned against him. But I'd take this scary over that scary any day. Me too. He kissed the top of her head. Thank you for saying yes. To the job, to staying, to this, to all of it. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for believing I was worth saving. You saved yourself, Emily. You ran into that fire. I just gave you a safe place to land after. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. Somewhere down there, people were struggling the way Emily had struggled. Sleeping rough, fighting to survive, wondering if anyone would care if they disappeared. That's why the foundation mattered. Why Emily threw herself into it with everything she had. She couldn't save everyone, but she could save some. Could offer the same chance Alexander had offered her. Not charity, but opportunity. Not pity, but genuine belief that people were worth more than their worst circumstances. A year after the wedding, Emily stood in front of the new community center the foundation had built. It was in the neighborhood where she'd slept rough, where she'd run into that burning building. Full circle. The center offered everything she'd wished for during her time on the streets. Hot meals, showers, clean clothes, medical care, job training, mental health support. But more than that, it offered dignity, treated people like humans instead of problems to be solved. Lucas held her hand during the ribbon-cutting ceremony. He was 8 now, tall for his age, still full of questions and energy. Still the kid who'd been brave in that fire and somehow even braver in the years after. Are you nervous? He asked. Terrified, Emily admitted. You're going to be great. You always are. The faith in his voice steadied her. She thought about his biological mother, Sarah, who she'd never met but somehow knew through Lucas's memories and Alexander's stories. Wondered if Sarah would approve of what they'd built. This unconventional family stitched together from loss and fire and impossible odds. She thought Sarah would. Emily gave her speech, talked about her mother's illness, about losing everything, about the months on the streets, and the moment she'd run into that fire. Talked about second chances and the people who'd given them to her. Talked about how everyone deserved to be seen, to be valued, to be given the opportunity to rebuild. We can't solve homelessness with one center, she said. But we can help the people who walk through these doors. We can see them. We can believe in them. We can offer them what I was offered. Not just a handout, but a hand up. A chance to remember who they were before life knocked them down. A chance to become who they're meant to be. The applause was thunderous. Danny was crying. Maggie was beaming with pride. Alexander's hand found hers and squeezed. After the ceremony, people lined up to thank her. Former homeless individuals who'd gotten jobs through the foundation, social workers who'd partnered with them, community members who'd volunteered. Each one had a story about how the work mattered. An older woman approached, hesitant. "Miss Carter, I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter, she's been on the streets for 2 years. Your outreach team found her last month, got her into housing, into treatment. She called me yesterday. First time I've heard her voice in a year." The woman was crying. Emily hugged her, blinking back her own tears. "What's your daughter's name?" Emily asked. "Rebecca. Rebecca Johnson." Emily made a mental note. She'd check in with the team, make sure Rebecca was getting what she needed. That was the thing about this work. It wasn't abstract. Every person had a name, a story, a life that mattered. That night, tucked in bed with Alexander reading while Emily scrolled through emails about the center's opening, she felt the weight of purpose settle over her. Not the desperate purpose of survival, but the deeper purpose of meaning, of using her pain for something that mattered. "You changed a lot of lives today," Alexander said, setting down his book. "We changed lives. This is as much your foundation as mine." "I just write checks. You're the heart of it." Emily set down her phone, turned to face him. "Do you ever regret it? Bringing me into your life? It would have been easier to just write me a check after the fire and move on." "Easier? Maybe. Better? Not even close." He pulled her close. "You didn't just save Lucas that day. You saved me from becoming someone I didn't want to be, someone who measured worth in dollars instead of moments, who thought success meant corner offices instead of family dinners. I was a mess when you met me. We were both messes. We just had different kinds of chaos." He kissed her forehead. "But we figured it out together. That's what matters." Lucas appeared in their doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Can't sleep." "Bad dream?" Emily asked. "No, just thinking." He climbed onto their bed without asking, fitting himself between them like he belonged there, which he did. "I was thinking about how you saved me from the fire, and then Dad saved you from being homeless. And then you both saved Dad from being sad all the time. And then Maggie saved us from having boring dinners." Emily laughed. "Is there a point to this?" "Yeah, I think people save each other. That's what families do. They save each other from being alone, out of the mouths of children." Emily met Alexander's eyes over Lucas's head, saw her own emotion reflected there. "You're pretty smart for an 8-year-old, Alexander said. "I know. It's a gift and a curse." Lucas yawned. "Can I sleep here tonight?" They let him stay, this kid who'd brought them together. Emily listened to his breathing even out, felt Alexander's steady heartbeat, and thought about Lucas's words. People save each other. She'd spent so long thinking she needed to save herself, to prove she could survive alone. But the truth was messier and more beautiful than that. Yes, she'd been brave in that fire. Yes, she'd fought to survive on the streets. Yes, she'd worked hard to build a new life. But she hadn't done it alone. Alexander had offered her a job when she had nothing. Maggie had helped her after the fire. Lucas had given her purpose. Dr. Chen had helped her process trauma. Danny and the others at the foundation had reminded her why the work mattered. And in return, she'd given them something too. Given Lucas a mother who showed up. Given Alexander a reason to come home. Given Maggie a family. Given Danny a second chance. That's how it worked. Not one person saving another, but people saving each other. Building a web of support strong enough to catch everyone who fell. The foundation expanded over the next 2 years. 3 more centers in different neighborhoods. Partnerships with major employers who agreed to give second chances to people with gaps in their employment history. A program that paid off outstanding traffic tickets and fines that kept people trapped in the system. Housing vouchers, medical care, education support. Emily hired a team to handle day-to-day operations so she could focus on big-picture strategy. But she never lost touch with the ground level. Still did outreach shifts, still talked to every person who came through the doors, still remembered what it felt like to be invisible. Lucas grew. Started 4th grade, then 5th. Became obsessed with science, then basketball, then reading fantasy novels until 2 in the morning. Struggled with math, excelled at writing, had his father's intensity and his mother's, both his mothers, compassion. He never forgot that Emily wasn't biologically his. But he never treated her as less than his real mom either. Called her mom without hesitation. put her name on Mother's Day cards, came to her when he had problems or fears or questions about life. "Do you think my first mom would like you?" he asked one day when he was 10, out of nowhere. They were making dinner together, Emily teaching him how to chop vegetables without losing a finger. "I hope so," Emily said carefully. "I think she'd be glad you have someone who loves you. That's what mothers want, for their kids to be loved and safe." "Dad says you're different from her, that she was really outgoing and funny and you're more quiet and thoughtful, but he says you both have the same kind of brave." "Your dad says a lot of things." "He's right, though. You are brave. Like, you ran into a fire, but also you're brave in normal ways. Like when you talk to people at the foundation who are really struggling and you don't look away from their hard stuff, or when you have panic attacks but you keep going anyway." Emily set down her knife, overwhelmed by this kid's emotional intelligence. "Where did you learn to see people like that?" "From watching you." Lucas said it like it was obvious. "You see people, really see them, so I learned to do it too." That night, Emily lay in bed thinking about legacy, about how the things we do ripple outward in ways we can't predict. She'd run into that fire to save one child, and somehow that action had saved her, had saved Alexander, had led to a foundation that had helped hundreds of people, had taught Lucas to see the world with compassion. One choice, one moment of bravery. And everything had changed. 5 years after the fire, the city threw a gala honoring the foundation's work. Emily hated galas. Too many people, too much attention, too much money spent on a party that could have been donated to programs. But Alexander convinced her it was important for fundraising, for visibility, for showing the city what was possible. She wore a dress that cost more than she used to make in a month and felt like a fraud the entire time. But then she saw the people whose lives had changed. Rebecca Johnson, the daughter of the woman who'd thanked her at the center opening, speaking about her recovery journey. Danny accepting an award for his outreach work. Former program participants who now had jobs, apartments, stability. The mayor gave a speech about how the Bennett Carter Foundation had become a national model, how other cities were copying their programs, how homelessness in their city had decreased for the first time in a decade. When Emily had to give her acceptance speech, she looked out at the crowd of wealthy donors and politicians and thought about what mattered. "I'm not supposed to be here," she started. 5 years ago, I was sleeping in alleys, stealing food to survive. I'd lost everything, my mother, my career, my home, my hope. The world had decided I was disposable, and I'd almost started believing it. The room had gone silent. But then there was a fire, and a little boy needed help, and I ran toward danger instead of away from it, not because I was special or heroic, but because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. She found Alexander in the crowd, saw his eyes shining with unshed tears. That one choice changed my life. But here's what I learned. It wasn't just my choice that mattered. It was Alexander's choice to find me, to offer me a job when he had every reason not to. It was Lucas's choice to trust me. It was Maggie's choice to help me after the fire. It was every person who chose to see me as human instead of homeless. Emily's voice strengthened. We tell this story like I'm the hero, like I saved Lucas and that's the end. But that's not true. Lucas saved me right back. This family saved me. This city saved me when it chose to invest in programs that actually help people instead of just pushing them out of sight. She looked at Rebecca, at Danny, at the dozens of others in the room whose lives had been transformed. The work we do at the foundation isn't about saving people. It's about seeing people, believing in them, giving them the tools and opportunity to save themselves. Everyone deserves that chance. Everyone deserves to be seen. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Emily stood at the podium trying not to cry, trying to process that this was her life now. That she was someone who gave speeches at galas instead of someone begging for change on street corners. But she was both, would always be both. The woman who'd survived and the woman who'd built something from that survival. The trauma didn't erase the triumph. The triumph didn't erase the trauma. They existed together, shaping who she'd become. After the gala, they went home. The penthouse, but also the house in the suburbs they'd bought 2 years ago. Somewhere with a yard for Lucas to play in, a garden for Emily to tend, space for Maggie who'd moved with them because she was family now too. Lucas was asleep in the car before they hit the highway. Maggie dozed off next. Just Emily and Alexander in the front seats, driving home in comfortable silence. You were amazing tonight, Alexander said quietly. I hate public speaking. I know. That's what made it amazing. You did it anyway. Emily watched the city lights fade into suburban darkness. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't run into that fire? If I just stood there with everyone else? All the time. And then I remember we don't live in that world. We live in this one, where you were brave and everything changed. Where we were both brave, Emily corrected. You took a huge risk hiring me, bringing a homeless woman into your home, into Lucas's life. Best risk I ever took. They pulled into their driveway, their house, their home, their life. Lucas woke up enough to stumble inside. Maggie went straight to bed. Emily and Alexander stood in the kitchen drinking tea, neither ready to end the night. Can I tell you something? Emily said. I still have nightmares sometimes about being back on the streets, about losing all this. I know, I hear you when you wake up gasping. Why didn't you say anything? Because you always settle back down. Always remember where you are. You're working through it at your own pace. Alexander took her hand. And because I have nightmares too. About the fire, about almost losing Lucas, about what my life would be if you hadn't been there that day. We're both healing from our own trauma. That's okay. Emily squeezed his hand. I love you. I don't say it enough. You say it every day, just not always with words. He pulled her close. You say it by coming home, by being present, by building this life with me, by loving my son like your own. That's how you say it. They stood there at their kitchen, the one Emily had been terrified to use when she first moved into the penthouse, convinced she'd break something expensive. Now it was just a kitchen. Their kitchen, where they made breakfast together and fought over whose turn it was to empty the dishwasher and lived a beautifully ordinary life. 10 years after the fire, Emily sat in the audience at Lucas's high school graduation and tried not to cry. Failed spectacularly. He was 17 now, tall and confident, giving a speech as valedictorian about second chances and the importance of seeing people's potential instead of their circumstances. He talked about his biological mother, who he barely remembered but honored anyway. Talked about Emily, who he called the bravest person he knew. Talked about his father learning to be present. Talked about Maggie teaching him that family was who showed up, not who shared DNA. My family is weird, Lucas said from the podium, making the audience laugh. I have a mom who died when I was 3, a mom who saved me from a fire, a dad who built a company and then realized companies don't matter as much as people, and an honorary grandmother who still tries to set me up with her friends' granddaughters, even though I've told her like 100 times I'm 17. More laughter. Maggie, sitting next to Emily, shook her head fondly. But here's what I learned from my weird family. Love isn't about biology. It's about choice. Every day, the people who love me choose to show up, choose to see me, choose to believe in me. And that's taught me to do the same for others. Lucas looked right at Emily. My mom, Emily, she teaches me that bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. She ran into a fire for me before she knew my name, and she keeps running toward hard things, toward people who need help, toward her own trauma, toward building a better world, even when it scares her. That's the kind of person I want to be. Emily was full-on sobbing now. Alexander's arm around her shoulders, Maggie passing her tissues, and she didn't even care who saw. After the ceremony, Lucas found them in the crowd. He'd already been accepted to 3 colleges, was planning to study social work because of course he was. Emily's influence, Alexander's resources, his own compassionate heart, all of it coming together in this remarkable kid who'd survived a fire and come out determined to help others survive their own. You okay, Mom? Lucas hugged her. You're crying a lot. Happy tears. I'm so proud of you. I learned from the best. He pulled back, grinning. Both of you. All 3 of you, really. I'm the luckiest kid alive. We're the lucky ones, Alexander said. You made us a family. Pretty sure Emily did that when she decided to stay. Lucas looked between his parents. But yeah, we're pretty great, aren't we? They were. They absolutely were. The foundation celebrated its 10th anniversary that same year. They'd helped over 2,000 people transition out of homelessness, opened centers in 6 cities, changed laws about employment discrimination, created a model that other organizations copied. But more than the numbers, Emily thought about the individual lives. Rebecca, who now worked as a counselor helping other women in recovery. Danny, who'd become the foundation's director of outreach. Maggie, who volunteered at the centers teaching others how to survive with dignity and humor. All the people who'd been invisible and were seen now, who'd been written off and were valued now, who'd been told they didn't matter and were proving every day that they did. Emily stood in the original center, the one in the neighborhood where she'd slept rough, where she'd run into that fire, and felt the weight of a decade's work settle over her. The exhaustion of it, the pride of it, the bone-deep satisfaction of knowing she'd taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. A young woman approached, hesitant. She looked like Emily had looked 10 years ago. Thin, dirty clothes, eyes that had seen too much too young. "Are you Emily Carter?" the woman asked. "I am. I read about you. About how you were homeless and now you do this." She gestured at the center. "Is it real? The help you offer? Or is it just another place that pretends to care but really just wants us to disappear?" Emily saw herself in this woman, saw the defensive anger, the desperate hope, the exhaustion of trying to survive when the world wanted you invisible. "It's real," Emily said. "Come inside, let me show you." She spent the next hour talking with the woman. Jennifer, her name was. Got her set up with a shower, clean clothes, a hot meal. Connected her with a caseworker. Listened to her story without judgment. Saw her. When Jennifer left with an appointment card and a small bag of essentials, she turned back at the door. "Thank you for not looking away." "Thank you for walking through the door," Emily replied. That takes its own kind of bravery. After Jennifer left, Emily sat in her office thinking about circles. How life moved in circles, patterns repeating until you learned the lessons or broke the cycle. She'd been Jennifer once, had been saved by people who chose to see her, and now she was paying it forward, seeing others, helping them find their way out. The fire had been this catalyst, but the real transformation had been slower, harder, learning to accept help, to believe she deserved good things, to build a life instead of just surviving. Learning that her worth wasn't determined by her worst moments, that trauma didn't define her even as it shaped her. That night, Emily came home to find Alexander cooking dinner. He'd gotten much better over the years, while Lucas helped and Maggie supervised from a stool at the kitchen island. The same scene they'd played out thousands of times. Never boring, always home. "How was the center?" Alexander asked. "Good. Helped someone new today. Reminded me why we do this." "Everything reminds you why we do this. It's kind of your thing." But he said it fondly, pulling her into a kiss that made Lucas groan dramatically. "You guys are so gross." "We're married. We're allowed to be gross." Emily ruffled his hair as she passed. "How was school?" "Boring, but I got an A on my sociology paper about systematic poverty and homelessness, so that's cool." "Using your family for homework. I taught you well." They ate dinner together, talking about their days, making plans for the weekend, existing in the mundane, beautiful routine of family life. Later, after Lucas went to his room to study and Maggie retired to watch her shows, Emily and Alexander sat on the back porch watching stars emerge in the suburban sky. "Do you miss it?" Alexander asked. "The city, the penthouse, when it was just us figuring things out." "Sometimes, but I like this better. The space, the quiet. Lucas having friends over without disturbing neighbors." Emily leaned against him. "I like who we've become." "Me too." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about stepping back from the company, not retiring, but delegating more, spending more time on the foundation, on this." He gestured at their house, their life. "The work we do together matters more than anything I've ever built." "You love your company." "I love you more. I love our family more. I love the life we've built more." He turned to face her. "I spent so many years chasing success, thinking that was the point. But the point is this, right here. Coming home to people who matter. Building something that outlasts us." Emily thought about legacy again, about what they'd leave behind when they were gone. Not money or buildings or companies, but Lucas, equipped with compassion and courage. The foundation, helping people long after they were gone. The ripple effects of choosing to see people, to help, to believe in second chances. "We did okay," she said softly. "Didn't we? Two broken people figuring out how to heal together. We did better than okay. We built something real." Alexander kissed her temple.
Thank you for running into that fire. Thank you for staying after. Thank you for choosing us every day even when it scared you. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for believing I was worth saving.
They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the sounds of their life. Lucas's music playing faintly from his room, Maggie's TV show filtering through the window, the normal beautiful noise of home. Emily thought about the woman she'd been 10 years ago. Broken, desperate, convinced she'd never be anything more than another invisible casualty of a system that didn't care. Thought about how close she'd come to giving up, to accepting that this was all her life would ever be. And then she thought about that moment. Standing in the street, hearing a child scream, making the choice to run toward danger instead of away. One moment, one choice. Everything changed. Not because running into fire made her a hero, but because that choice led to other choices. Led to accepting help. Led to staying when she wanted to run. Led to letting herself be loved. Led to building something bigger than herself. Led to healing in ways she hadn't known were possible. The fire had burned away who she'd been. But from those ashes, she'd built someone new, someone stronger. Someone who knew that worth wasn't about what you had or what you'd lost, but about who you chose to be when everything fell apart. She was Emily Carter Bennett now. Wife, mother, founder, survivor. All of it true. All of it her. And when she finally went to bed that night, she didn't check for an emergency bag under the bed. Didn't plan escape routes. Didn't prepare for disaster. Instead, she just slept. Safe, loved, and finally, home.